It says we're on the air. Okay.
Well, we're live.
We are
We're not
live.
Memorex.
Okay. Good evening, everyone, and we are now, I will call this a special work session of the Burnsville City Council to order. And this is the service discussion 2, and City Manager Lindberg, your opening remarks, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Members of the council, thank you for reconvening tonight and entering into the second of our planned summer, I can't think with the feedback, sorry, I totally lost my train of thought. The second of what is four, correct, of our service conversations with you. Tonight we are going to focus in 3 different departmental areas again, kind of answering or discussing with you how it is that our current service aligns with your strategic priorities. So tonight, Carissa Larson, our Director of Communications and Community Engagement, will kick off our time, followed by Tonya Schwartz, our Police Chief, and ADJOURNMENT, our Fire Chief, will complete the evening in order through each of those 3 departments. So with that, and my stumbling over words completed, I'll turn it over to Carissa Larson to do a much better job than I did in the way of introduction.
Well, good evening, Carissa, and you have the stage.
Thank you. Madam Mayor, members of the council, thank you for having me here tonight. I am very excited to have the opportunity to tell the story of our amazing communications and community engagement team. So much like you saw at our service presentations last week, we're going to go through a little bit about who we are, what we do, how we do our everyday work to contribute to the city's vision, values, and strategic priorities. I'm going to try to click through my computer and this computer at the same time, so we'll see how well I can walk and chew gum. Our communications and community engagement department, we really call ourselves bridge builders, right? We are about making connections and relationships to try to bring the city and the community together through storytelling and engagement in its best and its most innovative and efficient ways as we possibly can. By way of a little bit of background, I wanted to just kind of show you a little bit about how our story has changed over the last about 15 years or so. Going back to 2007, that's where my notes go back to at least. We were a joint powers agreement with Burnsville Egan Community Television. So BEC TV had 8 full-time staff at that point. We were very media heavy at that point in time. So we had 2 full-time staff at City Hall that included the communications director and what I believe was the communications specialist position at that time, and then 8 multimedia staff who were dealing with video. The city didn't have an official engagement function, and our front counter staff were staffed with other departments, right? My best guess, I don't have notes, but my best guess on that is recreation, HR, city clerk probably all had people up there at that moment in time. In 2008, Burnsville Egan Community Television separated, so we became Burnsville Community Television and Egan Television. We lost a lot of staff in that shuffle, and so we ended up with the same 2 communication staff, the director and the communication specialist, and ended up with 2 full-time media staff, and we went to kind of a part-time model with some videographers, fluctuating anywhere from 2 to maybe 4 or 5, depending on staffing, in any given point of the year. That continued, so I joined the City of Burnsville in 2012, and that was still the model we were using in 2012 when I got here. We were fortunate enough to move some things around and add in another FTE in 2013 that we split between what we called City Hall and the high school, right? Between communications and multimedia. That was a budget neutral move. We did it by bringing items that were contracted in-house. So there was a lot of discussion about, well, what are we currently spending money on that we could be doing? And what ended up happening was some of our positions, particularly my position as the communication specialist at the time, we just took on more. So we used to contract out the layout of the Burnsville Bulletin, writing, all of it, and instead that came in-house, and we started doing that ourselves. We continued that way for another number of years until about 2020. We did our first kind of official communications department strategic plan. And out of that came the notion that, hey, we really should have an engagement function in the city. And it makes a lot of sense to partner with the communications department. What might that look like is really what our plan talked about. Based on that, and we had some opportunity with some staff turnover, we decided to nix our part-time model at BCTV and take those part-time dollars and turn them into a third full-time multimedia position. So then we shuffled that position that was kind of splitting time between communications and media and moved it just to communications. So we were able to have kind of 3 and 3 at that time. We added an engagement manager and took on the front counter staff under our department, which we kind of redubbed as the experience department or experience function. So again, that was just moving pieces, right? We weren't really adding FTE, we were shuffling them around to different departments. In 2021 was the kind of first time we truly kind of added more without, added a new title, I guess, right? We added our digital communication or digital engagement specialist. We did that from shuffling a FTE from finance that was open at the time. So it helped us keep up with some changing needs. Digital, as we'll talk about, is a huge change in the last few years for us. And frankly, we were doing that to retain staff who were leaving because of how overwhelming our current workload was at the time. So we decided to ease that a little bit by bringing in this FTE. It's also about the time when our front counter staff started to really truly become kind of the experienced team. They went from multiple supervisors to centralizing under one supervisor and having more of a focus on experience and engagement, although their first priority is still managing that front counter, making sure we have coverage here at City Hall. The director position has also changed in the last couple of years, so I have it currently counted under our communications FTE there, but in reality it's no longer contributing to the tactics of the communications function that it once was. The position is now much more higher level organizational and strategic rather than kind of getting in the weeds of the everyday communication stuff. So we've had a lot of shift in terms of our responsibilities. If you shake out all the numbers, 2007 we had 10 FTE, now we have 11. Right, they look very similar at their base number level, but the numbers don't truly tell the whole story because of how much everything has shifted, how much needs have shifted over the years. Communications in particular looks a lot bigger than it was in 2015, but our methods of communications have changed drastically in those years. And I'm sure that, we didn't make many friends in moving some of those FTEs. The truth is, while we're grateful for that relief that we had, we know that we, kind of robbed Peter to pay Paul in our organizational movement of those things, in both communications and engagement. And while we're doing what we can organizationally, unfortunately, those moves they were to kind of help us tread water. They're not helping us get ahead. But that is kind of where our department shakes out today.
I think it's an important note, Chris. This timeline very much tells the story of how communications has evolved into communications, community engagement, and the 2021 move. Just for note, kind of put a pin in that conversation about the finance FTE moving into communications. All joking aside, that was not a popular decision, nor was it an easy one for me, but it was necessary at the time, to Carissa's point, for us to just maintain some semblance of balance in the department. Frankly, retain a very talented individual who was going to leave the organization and try to relieve some pressure from that position, and we had held that finance vacancy open for about a year and a half. You will hear from Dan and his team when we get to the finance presentation that was a very detrimental move to the finance operation, and there's no question that it was. It was a necessary operational decision at the time, but I think that's an important part of kind of why we're doing this, because we have been very efficient with the use of FTE, particularly in the administrative functions, what we've called organizational services for the past 2 years, and that will be a theme in these departments that certainly will hear more about.
And as I listen to the story and the timeline, Carissa, the functionality and the delivery of work is so different from what it was in 2007 and before that. Right now, we have a lot of social media that we didn't even do, not even last year or the year before.
Correct.
And when I look at the deliverables on social media on all different platforms, you're doing more than we've ever done. So, I mean, for example, what happened with the park, Nicollet Commons Park? You very quickly had something on social media, on Twitter, on Facebook. I think you had it on Instagram as well. And so a lot more of our residents understood what was going on, which is what we say we need to do is transparent.
Yep.
So when I look at the timeline from where we were and where we are now, you're delivering a lot more with a lot more functionality with the same number of people.
Yes, the times have changed, communication expectations have changed. We'll get into that a little bit, but we are still calling ourselves communications function, multimedia function, but they are vastly different
Very
than
different.
they ever used to be.
Yeah. Because I'm sure all of you, when you're working together, you have to get the message out when Ryan says, Nicollet Commons Park is down. You have to quickly get it out there.
Yep, I got Ryan's first email Ryan sent. I started getting my graphics together and pulling it all together. Yep, absolutely.
And the same is true with public safety, because I see that things happen and your team is on it and it's on all of the different channels. Then I start retweeting them and sharing them and
And I've also noticed it bleeds into areas where we don't have presence, like nextdoor.com. There was chatter about that, but people specifically referencing our Facebook posts. So even though we're not directly in those channels, because we exist here, it's impacting, those other areas, which makes a big difference.
I think, Vince, that's a great point, and the demand for responsiveness and timely information, and Carissa will talk about this, as you all know, as elected officials, is extraordinarily high, particularly if you compare today, 2022, back to 2013. The world is just vastly different for us. And one of my greatest concerns in this area is continuing to try to keep up with just the base level expectation of the community that we will have information out there, much less internally. How are we making sure that each of the 5 of you have that information in as timely a way as possible to then be able to interact with the community yourselves? It is a push-pull that we admittedly still don't have figured out in our current operation. We do our best, and we've got some great and talented folks in this area, and it's one that I'm incredibly cautious about asking too much of, because we've seen the downside of doing that in the past 3 years.
yeah. Well, you got a crispy that was going to leave.
Correct.
Ryan?
And they really provide a service to us, not they're not functional, but functional departments, the operational, they ask, what do you want to get out there? And then they take it all, so we're not having to think about how to get it out there. We just have to get them the information, and they literally take it from there, so
Yeah.
it's truly been a great change and tremendous partnership in what
Yeah,
they do.
it's great. Okay. Carissa?
So this is our team now. Some of you know we call ourselves Team Awesome. We pride ourselves on being there for the community and for being there for our fellow employees. So, you know, to Ryan's point, we talk often internally about how can we make things easy for everyone involved. We don't want Ryan's team to have to think about verbiage and wording and graphics. We will absolutely handle that so they can fix broken pipes. You know, we all have our roles to play, right? We are split into 3 work groups, as I kind of mentioned: communications, multimedia, and experience and engagement. They all work hand in hand to achieve kind of the goal that I set out earlier, right? Making connections, building bridges, telling stories. But they do each kind of have their unique set of methods that they use to achieve those goals. So our communications staff, they are amazing at collaboration, right? They collaborate and create in order to weave the stories for our various audiences. Our multimedia staff, you saw a little bit tonight, right? They are wizards when it comes to troubleshooting. They truly perform magic some days. Troubleshooting, recording, broadcasting, finding innovative solutions with innovative technologies. And our experience and engagement staff, they place excellence above all else when it comes to nurturing relationships and building trust with the
And the
community.
videos they put out, that really communicates our story. For instance, Station 1's video was really awesome, I thought. And there's only 2 people there. I think with the work that needs to be done.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it all takes time. We'll talk about that a little bit, but I think sometimes in today's technological, fast-paced world, it's easy to say, just throw together a video. I do it to my team all the time. I'm guilty of it as anybody else. Throw together a video, and I forget that takes weeks, sometimes, days to depend. Even a short video can take days.
I never do that to you, though. Right?
No,
Or is that-
never,
clearly.
never.
Never.
We have a fairly lengthy strategic plan that guides our work. These are kind of some of the core things that we aim for in that. So we are very focused on storytelling. We want to get away from info dumping. We want clear, concise messages. We try to rely on video and infographics as much as we can in order to kind of help some of those language or learning barriers. Promoting intentional community engagement. We don't just want to throw things at the wall and see what sticks. We want to actually talk and deliberate and figure out what would be good for our community. And continuously reimagining. We have to continue to reimagine how things look. What worked yesterday may just not work tomorrow. So you all kind of alluded to it. So much has changed in the past few years. I narrowed it down to kind of 3, but I probably could have gone on forever about this. A lot has changed just in the years since I've been here. A lot stayed the same, right? We still produce a quarterly newsletter. We still reach out to people on social media, but those things have grown and evolved as well. We are on far more social media accounts. The kind of information and the look and feel of the bulletin has changed. So everything evolves. Someone mentioned the expectations around responsiveness. Greg, was probably you. That's responsive is one of those keywords that comes up in our communications a lot. Members of the community expect to get news faster, and they expect to get it in their preferred communication method, right? And we don't always know what Ryan's preferred communication method is versus Tom's, but Ryan and Tom expect news to be where they are. Staff also expect that their news will get pushed out faster. So we have to be very timely, both internally and externally. We also have an increased number of staff who want their news pushed out. When I started here, Marty and I were kind of going door to door begging, like, we want your information.
Yeah.
Please help us tell your story. And now we continuously have staff saying, here, can you get this out any way you can? And can you help us inform the community on this? Hopefully that means we've proven the value of communications over the years, but it also means that we have far more to balance so that we don't overwhelm the community, right? There is a very fine line between getting the news you need and getting more news than you ever wanted. We also have to choose the right tools. Not every message can deal with every social media account or every method of print and digital and web and face-to-face. There are different tools for different purposes. and we have to figure those out with each message we get. It doesn't necessarily mean jumping ahead first into new technology, but it does mean researching new technology when we learn about it. Every time there's a new social media platform, we spend a lot of time ourselves, first being personal members of that platform and looking at how it works, figuring out kind of the culture there and determining if it might work for us as a city or not. Again, it doesn't always mean technology either. We reformatted the way the bulletin looks and feels over the years in order to kind of move away from very text-dense pages to more infographics, more pictures, to try to help engage our audience. And of course, it's no surprise that the demographics in our community are continuously shifting and changing. So we work hard to keep up with all of those changes. That means not only studying the shifts, but also how those shifts affect communication preferences, how we design things, how we engage with people. So there's always things to be looked at and learned and changed in our work. A little bit of background, we talked quite a bit last year about our community survey. The 2021 the residential survey, we asked residents how they prefer to receive information from the city. And the kind of the moral of the story in this chart is that it's everything. 56% of people say they still get their news from the bulletin. But after that, we get about 30% in newspaper, email, website, 20% say social media, 35% say direct mail, and then there's kind of this 25% of other. The moral of the story is we can't just say we're only going to focus on social media. People want information in a wide variety of places, and so we have to go to where those people are. And each and every one of these methods requires different types of text and different types of images, and you have to reformat. You can't just copy and paste everywhere you go. Even from social media platform to social media platform, reels versus stories versus photos versus videos, it is all very different, and it all takes different work to get it done. We also study our demographics, like I mentioned. So the particular demographics I tossed up here were from Esri's Tapestry segments that look at kind of neighborhood demographics and tell a different story rather than some other demographic areas we look at. Burnsville is a varied community. And so while each of these, the Bright Young Professionals segment, Home Improvement segment, and Old and Newcomers segment, they each have some commonalities. They all are very comfortable with technology. They're kind of up on the latest trends, but they're on the go in different ways, so capturing their attention is very different. The Old and Newcomers segment in particular, they still like to read the newspaper. So each population has a different sense that we talk about in our department about, well, how can we best meet them and their needs? Our 2021 community survey, we asked a couple questions about communication. As a quick reminder, the results from our 2021 survey are in scores, not percentages. So this is, a score out of 100 versus 74% of our population. We found that we're doing well in maintaining a website that meets people's needs. We're doing well in effectively communicating with the community. We're doing pretty well in communicating the vision and strategic priorities and how tax dollars are used. But we know that those are areas of focus that we want to see scores increase in the future. So those are also things that we talk about pretty heavily in our department about how do we make sure that happens the next time the survey comes around. We didn't ask specific questions about our engagement function. It was really early in the engagement function when we were doing a survey. We wanted to make sure we could benchmark as much as possible, so we chose not to customize too many questions around engagement. But there were questions throughout the survey that represent the city as a whole, and we believe we can, over time, as we do this survey again, we'll be able to see the impact of placing an organizational emphasis and an organizational lens on engagement. So we're really proud of these engagement scores, and I look forward to see how far we can go in the future when it comes to engagement. All right, I would be remiss not to talk a little bit about some comparisons to some of our fellow cities around the metro. These were peers that were identified and interviewed as part of our strategic plan process. Our consultant called each and every one of them and talked with them about what their communications and engagement functions look like. So as you look through, you'll note that some of our fellow cities use contracted media services, which at first blush kind of seems like, hey, that's maybe compelling. But the truth is that you're never going to get the quality, the understanding, the commitment to your community as you do with dedicated staff, right? We can be uniquely Burnsville in multimedia because we have uniquely Burnsville staff, versus contracting in some joint power with several other cities where we only get X amount of airtime. We don't get someone here learning what's happening, being invested, right?
Are we comparing apples to apples when you're comparing to other cities? Because when I look at what we deliver and what they deliver, it's not apples to apples.
It is hard to compare the art that comes out of a communications department, right? So when our consultant identified these cities, we did it based on a number of factors, right? It was a little bit of our market cities and a little bit of who we know kind of internally, our peers in terms of who we keep up with. Some of it was folks who have talked to us over the years about replicating our things, and vice versa, who we talk to about replicating some of their things. But it is hard to compare the amount or the quality or the quantity of what is produced communications department to communications department. Everybody is very different.
Like St. Louis Park has 9 media staff.
Yeah, Mayor and Councilmember Workman, I think you're drawing the appropriate conclusion here.
Yeah.
As I look at this slide, and as Carissa and I have talked about their strategic plan and what we know about the market, fact of the matter is our communications staff is about half of what we would say are most comparable. Mayor, to put it more simply, the best apples to apples we could come up with.
Yeah.
Our communication staff is about half. Our engagement staff is about half.
Yeah.
Now, we're uniquely Burnsville, and that's just a market comparison. But the reality is, I do think it paints the picture of not only how effective our staff are in this area. Frankly, they crank. Most days I don't know how they do it. And on the flip side of that, there is a lot of dreaming and kind of responsive conversation about how we want to make connections with our community that frankly we're not going to be able to do. Something would have to give. And that's part of the kind of the push and pull of the conversation of what we're asking for. As Chris gets to the end of this presentation, we're not anywhere close to suggesting through the org analysis that this department doubles. As a matter of fact, I believe it's the addition of 3 FTEs,
3.5.
Carissa.
Yep.
So we're trying to continue the spirit of being uniquely Burnsville, being effective, but also trying to do the things that we really aspire to do, and continue to do it in a way that's reflective of how we've approached it in the past.
Okay. Okay.
Many cities are just starting engagement work, right? So we're in good company there. My one kind of note as I looked through this again to put this presentation together was a lot of cities do have staff that are dedicated only to engagement, right? We don't have, with the exception of Edina, we don't see a lot of cities who are sharing staff with their front counter, and even in Edina, their front counter staff are dedicated to the front counter. Our staff are trying to do double duty. They're trying to, help people at City Hall. They're really good at that, and they're trying to learn how to be good engagement staff as well. So.
And that's what I was getting at, because when I'm looking at this, it's, they're looking at communication staff and
Yep.
not the engagement.
We have the addition of, again, we love it. We really do love seeing people every day at City Hall, but it is an extra thing that we try to balance.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So moving on, we'll show you a little bit about the work we do every day and how we try to help balance the work we do for other departments while also maintaining strategies of our own. So in aligning with the strategic priority of safety, I have the great honor of working with BJ and Tonya and their staff every day. I wish that the work we did wasn't always around like planning for the worst. Sometimes I wish we could just like hang out and have fun. And often what we're talking about is, well, okay, what if this happens? How do we be prepared for that? But the truth is that we plan for the worst so that we can be our best when it happens, so that we are just, you know, we are ready to inform the community of what's going on. Should something, you know, a natural disaster, a man-made disaster, should something happen, we're ready to communicate with that community. So it's a lot of emergency and crisis communication planning, training, executing it when it happens. It never happens in the middle of a workday. It always happens on a weekend, on an evening, you know, and so we make sure that we are prepared for how do we do those things at any time of day. There's a lot that happens with media relations, and that happens daily. I am often talking with local reporters about any story. Raquel as well. Raquel yesterday was working on getting a reporter out here to film the goats in Civic Center Park, right? We do those stories every day so that we build those relationships so that there's trust there with the media when we do have a great need, then we need them to help us tell our story. In our department, we manage the mobile volunteer network as well, so that's another piece of safety and emergency communication. We're trying to work with police and fire to make sure that MVN can help, you know, again, whether it's a fire or there's a tornado, or how can MVN be on the ground helping make the worst days maybe at least a little easier for people.
Chris,
Yeah. Dan?
I just want to compliment the green and gold colors that you used. Even though it was not on brand, it was on my brand. I was curious why you actually deviated from the city's colors with green and gold.
Those colors were for Juneteenth, right? They're kind of the honor of the Pan-African colors.
Juneteenth.
Yep.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Gotcha. Well, good use of that, and I think they're great colors for a lot of reasons, including Juneteenth. I'm curious what the icons are under your sensory inclusive spaces. I can't quite make out what they are. I think hands,
Let me take a
and
look
then
here.
trees and a.
It is
bench?
later in the evening, and so I have to do one of these when my eyes get tired. So we've got our sensory lounge has like hand, eye, ear, and a nose there in the yellow. So we had three spaces at Juneteenth where people could go. The sensory lounge was in the building, so that was much quieter. It was dark, had some fidget toys. The red is the quieter retreat. That was, if you're familiar with North River Hills, it was up the hill toward the tennis courts, so you could still hear and see everything. It was just a tad quieter up there. So that's a tree and a picnic bench. And then MVTA brought a bus, and they left the air conditioner on, so you could have a cooling bus.
Right.
So that's a little icon of a bus.
Cool.
Yep. So sensory inclusive spaces are one of our kind of new initiatives that we're working on. Our engagement function is very much community-led, which I'll talk about in a minute, but that was something that community members brought to us and said, hey, it would be really nice if events had a place where we could kind of get away when we need to. And that is, you know, for us, that aligns a lot with our safety and well-being priority. The other thing that we do when it comes to access for all abilities is focus highly on ADA compliance in our digital spaces. We have a lot to learn there. It is very hard to keep up with those regulations and best practices. So we try as best as we can. But website, social media, video, they all have different notions on what you should do with ADA compliance. And so we try to stay up on all of that as well. I was very tempted to just put everything we did under community engagement, but the truth is we do a lot with each of our strategic priorities. I could go on and on about our engagement function, but you know, we've talked before how we really define community engagement as an active relationship between the community and the city. We don't just want to tell the community, here's what you need. We want this to be community-led. We want to listen. We want to hear what the community needs and wants from their city and determine what we can do from there. You know, again, it's a balance between desire and capacity in terms of what we actually can accomplish. But we are committed to continuing those community-led strategies as long as we possibly can. I mean, that would be our dream, is to always just go where the community leads us. Right now, in this early stage of engagement, we are focusing on populations that are either historically or currently maybe not feeling as connected with the city, so that we kind of can aim ourselves in a direction on where to start building relationships, right? And once we meet people and go to meetings and hear, then we start doing tactics that help to meet those needs. But there are so many ways, not just in our engagement work group, but in all of our work groups where we connect with the city. Broadcasting public meetings is a big way that we get into people's homes to connect local government with the community. Of course, we do a lot of one-on-one meetings. Amber goes to very many community committees. 191 has an equity committee. They have a 191 community connections coordinators. There's a know your neighbor group. She's probably sitting at home watching and yelling all of the meetings she goes to constantly. I couldn't list them all. She goes to a lot, and they're of course all in the evening, right? I mean, she spends a lot of her time sitting and listening
They're the
in all of
senior
those meetings.
health.
Yep. She also coordinates two groups of her own. So Amber coordinates our community partners group, where she brings in organizations from around Burnsville to ask, hey, how can we work together on engagement initiatives? And she coordinates a staff engagement champions team to try to kind of cascade engagement ideas and best practices throughout our organization.
I would say, Carissa, the community engagement function is a group of people, all of which we reallocated people, their positions, and FTEs to focus on our collective commitment to engagement. Really to building relationships and creating connections beyond how we typically have done business. This is an area I'm incredibly passionate about. You all know that. And one where really it's our job to create great experiences in and amongst our community. And part of that is rethinking how we do things organizationally. How do we best identify the unique and diverse needs of this community as it continues to evolve? What are the differences that make a difference? How are we building competence, not only amongst our community engagement staff, but competence across all of our professional staff to best meet the needs of an ever-growing, diverse community? But also really be committed to, at the end of the day, a similar type of evolution that Carissa has talked about in the communications function, where just but 10 years ago, she and our director at the time were going around to functional areas of the organization saying, hey folks, remember us, we want to help you tell your story and communicate with the community. Our organizational lens on community engagement is probably the most important staff operational initiative from my perspective right now. Amber's work with our engagement champions is all about how do we centralize the leadership and the intention organizationally for us to best connect with the community, best meet their needs, and create the type of experience where our community wants to interact with city staff. And frankly, we're meeting them on their doorstep, wherever that might be. And that all of our functional departments kind of come around that strategic priority in their own unique way, from police to fire to administration to public works, whomever it might be, for us really to do this work together. It's the only way that it's going to be effective for the people that we get paid to serve. And this area has been one that I'm very proud of how we've efficiently built it. And we're asking them to do an awful lot with increasing pressures, both from a front counter perspective and just in general with the organization, what we're hearing from the community. Those are the areas that we need to pay particular attention to in this department to really figure out how do we bring our strategic priority in this area to life.
Yep, absolutely. We are lucky enough to work with staff outside of our department who are, committed to this as well. They may not know exactly what to do in these spaces, right? So that's where we try to help champion and encourage, empower where we can. Our current staff elections committee is a great example of, a group of staff coming together and saying, well, how can we make sure that people know how to vote, when to vote, what to do, and take away some of the perhaps fear someone might have as a first-time voter, and let them know that polling locations have changed. So we've put a great emphasis, and that is, again, that's kind of cross-departmental, right? It's engagement, and it's communications, and it's multimedia, and it's our city clerk staff, and there are a lot of groups that come together to make things like that happen.
Well, really, and in the kind of the traditional model of delivering local government service. The mantra has been, if the community reaches out to us, how are we reaching right back? How are we being responsive? And frankly, my challenge for staff has been turn that on its head. At the end of the day, how are we reaching out to the community to understand their needs, to make connections, to build relationships, so that the delivery of city service can happen functionally, effectively, meeting their needs, but most importantly, that we're connecting with the entirety of our community in meaningful ways, to really think different about how we deliver service. And that really starts with the work of Amber and her team and building those relationships and thinking differently about how we operate.
Amber also spends a lot of her time helping, being a liaison to community and legacy events. That is not a small amount of time either. Those are also evening meetings. But she, kind of dutifully goes and tries to help those groups figure out how to bring more engagement there. Our communications function also does a lot in terms of event and initiative promotion. That's all a part of engagement, is education. So it is promotion for our legacy events, our department programs and events, some of our community partner initiatives. It's writing communications plans, doing media relations, billboards, posters, flyers, social media, print ads, cable, you name it, and we do it. On top of all of that, we are kind of, getting into the space of hosting some of our own events in our department. That is not something that communications ever did before, and now with the addition of our engagement function, we try to do things a little bit differently. So we refer to them as engagement events versus some of the other events that happen in the city. And we try to kind of tell ourselves that what we're trying to do is provide intentional opportunities to build community. So things like Juneteenth and Pride, or community conversations, listening sessions, those are very much, they are less about how many people did we get at the event, and more about, did people have meaningful conversations? Did they make meaningful connections while they were there? Our hope is kind of to open the door, to let the community know that they are welcome, that they belong at the city, that they belong at all city activities, right? So that they can start coming to other things as well. I will tell you that I think that these events are already starting to make a difference. Last year was our first year doing Juneteenth and Pride. This year is our second year. Those were some of my best days at work last year, were hosting those events. At Juneteenth last year, I was talking with a woman who said, I have lived in Burnsville for nearly 20 years, and this is the first event I felt like I belong. And it felt so good to be able to provide that for somebody who has been a part of this community for a very long time and just didn't feel right in the space, and now felt a moment of true community for her. Again, I could go on about engagement all day, but our future initiatives include, continuing to understand diverse populations. I mean, we have a long ways to go. We have our own backgrounds that we come from as staff. We need to make sure that we're understanding others. We want to plan for more community listening opportunities to make sure that we're still moving in the right spaces, and championing engagement throughout our organization, because we know we can't do it alone. No matter how many staff you have, you can't do engagement alone. It has to be an organizational lens. Organizational culture is all about supporting staff for us. So we do a lot of internal staff communication. We want to make sure that staff have all of the information that they need, because they are ambassadors in the community. So we want to make sure that they're well prepared with, messaging that is consistent and proactive and is in the correct tone and tenor and all of it. So we try to make sure that we over-communicate for clarity when it comes to our staff. We do a lot of writing, proofing, coaching for communications for all departments. So even something as simple as emails, sometimes we have staff coming to us and saying, can you just put some eyes on this, because we want to make sure we get it right. We want to make sure that we are making things as easy to support our staff as we can. This also includes some of the more traditional communication methods in order to tell our story, get the word out about what initiatives are happening. So we produce the bulletin 4 times a year. Each issue of the bulletin takes about 6 weeks. So every time we finish an issue, we about pick up the next one again. We do the recreation times once a year. We do the community guide every other year. Those are very labor-intensive publications that we put out. Our multimedia staff are constantly working on video production, whether it is event promotion or recap, talking about new initiatives, doing recruitment. We do a lot of staff training videos, so it can be, just everyday things, but we're spending several hours setting up cameras and tearing down cameras and miking everybody up. And then, of course, our experienced staff are also doing customer service, lobby management, facility reservations. They accept payments. They're doing administrative support for the entire organization. And again, researching best practices about customer service, things like that. In addition to managing the mobile volunteer network, we manage the rest of the city's volunteer staff as well. Just like our HR department has an emphasis on making sure that staff have great experiences, we want to make sure that our volunteers have great experiences as well. And we try to make sure we do everything we can to make sure our volunteers feel just as much a part of our organization and as much of our community as possible. Community vibrancy, we spend a lot of time managing brand. Our new brand initiative hopes to manage some of that, right? To kind of bring us back to a consistent look and feel and all of it. And we know that we will always have to manage it, no matter what. That is always going to be something our department will have to do. It's everything from lobby signage to permanent signage to a website to, flyers and reports, all of it. Customer service standards, writing guides, design guides, all of those things we produce in our department in order to help staff get their message out. We take photographs and videos at all kinds of events in order to show great images of our community. It's corny, but a picture is 1,000 words, right? I mean, that those images are priceless when it comes to telling our story. We also do live mobile event coverage with our multimedia function. So they take the truck and they go to city concerts and school events and film special public meetings. They do community events. That is a unique offering for our community that a lot of communities don't have right now. And again, we do it with dedicated staff who understand Burnsville in a way that no one else could for us. Our community gets a lot of live programming that I think a lot of communities don't have the opportunity to do. Part of vibrancy is supporting initiatives from other departments in terms of promoting places and spaces that enhance our community. So the ice center, the golf course, parks, trails, recreation programming, home energy squad, housing initiatives, I mean, you name it, right? All the good things that our organization does, we have to get the word out somehow, or those good things don't go anywhere. And so part of telling our story is making sure that we understand and support all the things that are happening. Vibrancy, I think often we define internally as economic development strategies, and certainly we help support the economic development strategic plan that was developed a few years ago. There's an entire marketing plan that goes with that, and that is, our department does a lot of the executing for that marketing plan. So print, digital, web, bulletin, it is kind of all over the board on helping with those tactics as well. And building partnerships with business-oriented organizations. We talk with the CVB and the Chamber and several other organizations about how we can help in those spaces where we can. We maintain a pretty large digital infrastructure that I think I didn't really consider to be infrastructure until I started putting this together and realized, there is a lot there. So we maintain a full-service website, a full-service intranet. We are on 6 social media platforms. We try to post twice a day-ish. Each platform, like I said, is very different in their format and what's required. We do probably 2 email blasts a day. Burnsville in Brief is an online report that's produced 12 times a year. The annual report focus on Burnsville, several story maps a year. These are all digital platforms that we have to learn and continue to learn. The My Burnsville app and other tech as it comes up. Of course, we manage all the AV equipment for the council chambers, cameras, microphones, lights, speakers, all of cable management, all of it comes through our multimedia function. That used to be very much a direct to you, just providing video function. Now it is very interactive with the addition of Zoom and other sorts of things that our multimedia function kind of manages. Of course, our infrastructure is going to expand a little bit this summer with the addition of our community engagement vehicle that we're going to take around and bring City Hall on the go. We also know that there will be many new communication and engagement platforms that come up in the next few years. I couldn't even imagine what those are now. Sustainability for us is thinking about how we can kind of make sure that some of these things can hold their own in the future. So we think a lot about language translation in our department. It is something that is needed and something that we have to make sure we do right. We don't want to do something that will kind of cause us to go backward accidentally in our relationship building. It is not as easy as putting things into Google Translate, right? Things go wrong when you do that. So we want to develop sound policy to make sure that our organization is doing things kind of consistently and professionally in one way, and thinking about both capacity for material translation, but also environmentally. We don't want to be printing things in multiple languages that are environmentally unsustainable, right? We have to sustain relationships with our cable franchise agreement. That is a big part of our budget, certainly, but also just the city's kind of overall funds maintaining our cable franchise. We have to find a way. We are working toward finding a way to sustain our public access program in a way that is relevant and relatable for our community. Public access is no longer the same as it once was. You have very few people who come in and say, hey, I want to sit down in your studio and film a video for myself and put it on. People have cameras in their pockets, right? And so they don't necessarily come to public access the same way they did. But how can we make sure that we are providing equipment for those who need it, or space for those who need it, and just opportunity for those who need it in a way that's relevant to today? All right. Coming up on
So
the
can I
whole
ask you a quick
Yeah.
follow-up on that?
Yeah.
So, and this is something that I think people generally forget about, but the access to that equipment, I mean, could somebody come in and film a campaign video and then, edit it there on the spot with our equipment? Or would it be more of just utilizing the space, taking the media home and then, doing post-production that way? And you don't have to dive down the rabbit hole, but just kind of.
Yeah, and the answer, I think.
And I was joking about the campaign.
I was going to say, I think it gets a little different with the campaign stuff.
That was just a joke, but.
So things changed a little during COVID. So right now, what we're offering is a little different than what we used to, because during COVID we thought, I don't know how we clean all of this equipment all the time if people borrow it. But yeah, I mean, currently with our current setup, people can come and use the physical studio, or they can borrow equipment, they can edit, right there, in our spaces. We don't get that many people doing it anymore. And so that's part of it too, is, well, what is our return on investment for having and maintaining all of this equipment that maybe people don't need, but maybe they need something else, and we just haven't heard from the community yet what that is, right? But yes, right now that is the intention, is that someone could come in and do start to finish video production. Yep.
Thank you.
What is important to us is really, it is this simple for us. We want to ensure that every member of the community feels welcome, and we want to be a partner when it comes to finding solutions. We don't want to be the department that just makes things pretty. We believe we have much more value to our organization than that, and we want to make sure we are looking out for the community as much as we can. Our challenges are probably similar and yet unique, to other departments. We have a number of increases for our time. That is a difficulty. Technology changes very rapidly. That is hard for us to keep up on. Really what a lot of this boils down to is kind of maintaining some of the consistent brand standards to help make sure that we are doing everything in the best way we can, right? And I think, unfortunately, things that appear very simple take a lot of our time, but because they appear simple, right, it can kind of increase some of those pressures on, well, can you just quick do this? So we put up the picture of our goldfish post because it is one of those examples of something that we thought was very innocuous. We really look at each and every word of a social media post. It is not the same as when I post on my own private social media accounts and I can just write it and be done with it. We look at every word and every picture very carefully. This one we thought, cute, done, post it. And this one was a week and a half or 2 weeks of our time as we fielded, international media calls about it. So you never quite know. We say we are a centralized communications department, but the truth of the matter is that we are not. We don't have the capacity to be a centralized communications department. We try very hard to be as centralized as we can. There is more we could do organizationally with our voice, with our look. We could make sure that things are more consistent if we had the capacity. Okay. Aspirationally, we want to just continue to do right by this organization, by this community. We want to be leaders in our spaces. We want to make sure that other city staff have the tools that they need to do communication well without, kind of worrying about if they're doing it well. And we want the chance to be more strategic and proactive. We want to make sure that we're not just reacting to things. And we, kind of want to see what's coming before it hits us square on a little bit. That would be my dream, right? So Greg mentioned it right away in the beginning, but this kind of, re-sums up what the organizational analysis said for our department. It calls for us to gain 3.5 staff that are spread across all 3 of our work groups. And we've kind of talked about it a little bit throughout, but the addition is it would be very helpful for us to relieve some of that pressure, to take some of those backlogged projects off of our plates, actually get them moving forward. But it mostly kind of stops the bleed, right? It doesn't necessarily help us reach those aspirations I just talked about. It helps relieve some of the stuff that's piling up. So that is all I had. I appreciate your time.
Great.
And-
So one of the things that I'm hearing from you as we go forward is that the increase in evening meetings is creating pressures and
It certainly
challenges.
does. Absolutely.
And
Yep.
there's changing technology that you have to be on top of. You're also talking about different social media platform and trying to meet the different needs of the different groups that we're communicating to. And so you're also wanting to make sure that you have staff for this new brand element that we're working through to look at the city brand.
Our current communications staff are going to, sit on the core team for that project. Our hope is to make sure that the outcomes of that project make it easier on all staff. So that
So
when
you have
we
the
see
same
things,
message.
we're not always having to change items for people.
Okay, so with all of these challenges and your aspirations to be a regional leader in community engagement, what you're saying to us is that you need you need to go from 11 to 14 and a half, so you need 3 more FTEs to accomplish what you want to accomplish with regard to the aspirations of the Communications and Community Engagement Division.
I think it helps us get there. I don't think 3.5 will help us suddenly,
But
be
it's on
standing
the
at a
way.
national conference, right?
But it's on the way.
It certainly gets us much, much more down the path, absolutely.
Okay,
Oh, I gotta go
Thank
change
you.
this for Tonya.
so next,
Thank you, communications firm.
next is Police Chief
Yes,
Tonya
we're-
Schwartz.
yes. We'll get it pulled up here and. Right. Excellent. So I'm gonna try to page through these. No, which way? I'll do this guy or?
Yep, right. No.
I have IT friends and other people to help me. Oh.
Tell me what
I
I'm
might
going.
need you to. I might need you to. So, Well, first of all, just want to say thank you for the opportunity to be here, to just have a chance to share with you and the community a little bit more about who we are, how we serve Burnsville, the different challenges and changes that we're experiencing. It's really, I do really serve with honor as the police chief. I'm very grateful for this opportunity, and I'm really proud of our police officers, the women and men, and from sworn to civilian staff that come in and every day and provide excellent service to our community. So I will talk a little bit about who we are, how our services have changed. There's been a lot of changes. There's been a lot of challenges in policing over the years. But some key things, which I think are really important, have remained consistent, and I want to talk a little bit about those because those really get into our priorities and our values. And you know what we want to do, who we are, is we want to provide the highest level of public safety service that we can to our community. That's at the core of what we do, and how we do that really is values driven. We are focused on our mission, our core values, procedural justice, how we treat people, the dignity and sanctity of people's lives, right? So with everything that's changing in law enforcement that has changed, we hold to the things that we can control, and those are the things that we control. And when we do that, we do safety, and we do safety for our residents, we do safety for businesses, visitors, and we do officer safety. So all of that falls into that bucket there. And then when we do that, we also align with the city's priorities and organizational values, innovation, collaboration, excellence. So I tell our teams, focus on the work that we do, what we're grounded in, and we're gonna meet the expectations of the city as well. And that really helped us when we think about the pandemic, going through the pandemic, all the changes there, legislative changes, historic changes that we saw, narrative of defunding police. Thankfully, we never had that here. Our community really rallied around us. The council very much supported us. And so, but those things that happen in a profession really impact the actual day-to-day operations that we were doing. So we're very grateful to just sort of stay close to those things that we can control. A little bit more about who we are. I can't put an organizational chart on here with all of our faces because we would take up the entire screen. We're the largest department in the city. So we have 91 total employees, 75 sworn, and then the rest are our civilian staff. And when you look at this graph, you can kind of see that main bucket there in the beginning. So we have operations, we have administration, and we have support services, and that's spread across our whole department. But the bulk of what we do is really in operations. So you see our officers, our patrol division is in there. That's our 24/7, 365 emergency response. So our investigators are also in there, behavioral health, all of our specialties. So behavioral health, community engagement, our school resource officers, and the 20+ specialties that we have with, that are additional duties that our officers participate in, which could be crime scene and our SWAT team and honor guard and all those services that we provide. So those fall in that big bucket. Obviously, they spread between all of our department or all of our divisions, but we have also an administrative division. And when you look at that, that's really about our emergency management, how we do safety in the schools, active shooter, reunifications, professional standards. So all of our policies, all of our licensing, all of our mandates, people, policy, training, supervision, discipline, all that stuff of a really sound organization fall under that piece of that administrative division. And then support services, who are primarily our non-sworn staff, but are really the backbone of the work that we do. So they're doing all the behind the scenes work. So as officers are working on cases and cases are coming through, they're getting things sent electronically to county attorneys and city attorneys and tickets and data and auditing. So they are really doing all that. They are also our front-facing public experience folks at our reception. So they're providing a service to the community. And so all of these services run across all of our divisions, and of course our leadership team, and just overseeing the executive team, seeing everything happen on that larger picture. It's sort of who we are, you know. So we're a big department, and we're full service department. So we take pride in the services that we give to the community, because we can process our own crime scenes, and there's confidence in me as a chief knowing we're doing it uniquely Burnsville to some of the ways like we've talked about here. We have our own staff providing these services. We don't necessarily have to call on other cities to come in and help us for specific things. Now we will for mutual aid and things like that, but overall we can run our operations, and they do excellent job at it. But these things are all above and beyond their everyday responsibilities, so. But it provides professional development, so there's a lot of important reasons why we do the things that we do as to who we are, so.
So with today's badging, how many sworn officers total do we have?
So we are, with those ones that we just badged in today, we'll be up to our 75 sworn. We're down a community service officer, but we have come huge strides over the last 2 years, because if you remember, last year you were at a similar badging ceremony where we had 6 officers, and it takes months to train our officers and getting them on board and doing the onboarding process, months of training and field training, and then for them to get through probation and be on their own. So it's a very long process. And
Tell
we've
the
been
community
grateful.
what that means, Chief, because it is very important for the community to understand that even when you badge them, there is a long process of onboarding so that they
Right.
can be out there.
Yeah, so when they come from, they have, first of all, we require a 4-year degree. So sometimes they're coming up through our community service officer ranks. So we're helping them complete their 4-year degrees and then getting them onboarded. Other times they come to us laterally from another agency. And then sometimes they come right out of school, or they come from a career change. We've had many people come in a career change. But when they come on board, they have the licensing requirements that the state requires that they have. So they have the basic training they need to have. But again, how we do it in Burnsville, that's different than every other agency, across the state. Everyone does it different. And we take a lot of pride in the high standards and the training and the professionalism that we have in our department. So when they come on, we do a 2-week onboarding academy just to get them kind of reacquainted back to, this is how we do it in Burnsville. They meet with me, they spend time with me. I talk to them about our culture, our values, our mission, the things that are important to us. I talk about our badge, how that represents the trust that we have with the community and the importance of that. And just how every interaction we have builds trust or breaks trust with the community. So they hear this from me, and our staff train in the folks during the onboarding. So this academy goes on and they meet our use of force instructors. So then we train them to the way that we do de-escalation. We train them to the way of our policies. We train them to the way of how we're gonna interact with people. And so it's 2 weeks of that. And then they go into 3-4 months of field training. So depending on how long, how they're doing in field training. They have a trainer that starts out in the beginning where they're working and learning the job. And then each phase that they go through after a month's time, they go to another field trainer. So they go to a different time in the city, maybe a different area of the city, so they can learn everything that's going on. And then they have to perform a little bit more each time as they go through this process. And eventually, they get to where they're on their own and they have to be calling on their other partners that are there for them, not the person that is their field trainer. So it really is, it's meant to, we want them to succeed. So we are not an agency that is like, we're trying to find everything wrong with someone and kick them out of the program. This is an investment. We want people to come here. We want people to stay here. And so that's a long process. And then if they can get through that, then they have a probationary period of another year, and then they just begin all the other training that we do just day to day to meet our licensing mandates. So post mandates, use of force training, de-escalation, autism training, all the mandates that we have, they're doing that all the time. And then they're just getting to know, understanding, meeting other staff. What do we do for community engagement? What are the things that are important to us? And again, I tell them, you focus on the mission, you focus on the values, and you're gonna make the right decisions, and you're gonna do the right thing, and we're not gonna have a problem. You go outside the bounds, then we're gonna have a problem, and we're gonna deal with it, and because these are humans, and we make mistakes. People have bad days, and but then we have to be accountable to that, and we have to do the right thing. And so we're transparent about the process, and again, want them to be successful.
Yeah, good.
And then I'll just briefly talk about this, again, with our mission and values. This is part of our strategic plan, which I'll talk about in just a minute. But when I came on as chief, this was something people wanted to do. There was a desire to, where are we going? You know, what are the next steps? A new chief, we want a fresh start, you know, where are we going this way? And so when we started to look at our strategic planning process, we said, what grounds us? It's our mission, it's our core values. So this is the basis for how we did that work. And then when we did that in 2019, again, it was really what I was hearing from staff is we want to know where we're going. We want to make sure that we're doing the right things for the community. We're doing the right things for the council. We're doing the right things, you know, across the board. And so every division in our department was represented when we did the strategic planning process. So we had a consultant come on board and help us. Took longer than we thought because of COVID, so we had to go to, you know, some remote work to get that done, but everyone was able to provide feedback either by surveys or focus groups or through their teams. And what emerged, you can see here, is our strategic priorities emerged. Community engagement, staff wellness, scheduling and staffing, and then training and development. And if you look at those and you think about them, there are ways that all of those interact with the council's strategic priorities. And so when looking at this, I'm really grateful that we have this opportunity to talk about staffing and scheduling, because that was one of the biggest things that came out of our staffing, out of our PD strategic priority planning, was we don't have enough people to do the work that we're doing. So what are we expected to do? What can we do? Here's what we want to do. We have people that really want to provide excellent service, but they're burned out. We can't do it. We're going call to call. We don't have the time to do some of those things. So that was something I pushed for since I became chief, is I want us to do a staffing analysis, specifically for the police department. And I was grateful for City Manager Lindbergh and the council to say, we're gonna look at this across the entire agency. And I know our staff is very grateful as well to know that these conversations are happening. So we just realistically know what we're dealing with and where can we go from here. So what's changed? I think that's a presentation in and of itself when it comes to the policing world right now, and really across our organization. But the job we did 25 years ago when I came on, 27 years ago, it's not the same job that it is today. It's not going to be the same job in 6 months, and it's not, 5, 10, 20 years down the road. It's going to continue to evolve and change, and that's good. It's good to have change in law enforcement. In any profession, it's good to have change, and we're adaptable and we can overcome, and we've been doing that. So I think the things that have changed is the complexities of calls, the dangers that there are in calls, so the trauma, not just the trauma of our community, which is great, and we see that with the behavioral health unit, and it is why we launched the behavioral health unit, because there was so much, so many calls. Those calls are tripling. And we have to reach out to the community in different ways. And so we just said, we're gonna do it. We didn't have any staff to do it, but we said, we're gonna take some people, rob Peter to pay Paul, and we're gonna go try to do this. And it's been an amazing program, and we are seeing a lot of success with that. But the trauma of our community is one thing, the trauma that police officers experience. More trauma than ever before. I'll say that's what's changed, because there's more calls than ever before. It's more violent. People are carrying more weapons, people have more drugs, there's more disrespect for police, and in many ways, police have become responsible for other system failures that happen across society, because we're the only 24/7, 365 operation that when on your worst day and everything has gone wrong and I don't know who to call, I call 911 and we show up. And so, I'm sorry. Oh, there we go, sorry about that.
Sorry.
So those things become increasingly dangerous, and as those failures happen, that also falls on police. So we're trying to respond, we're trying to do what we can do. And again, mistakes can happen, and we have to be accountable to that, but we're also not perfect. These are not robots, these are human beings that we're dealing with. So there's unrealistic expectations in some cases as to what police should be responsible for. And we're working differently in that way now with the behavioral health unit. And we're adapting and pivoting and saying, there's a time and place for law enforcement to be here. There's a time and place where law enforcement maybe doesn't have to be the first one on the scene. And so we're working with social workers. I found out we're gonna be getting a full-time social worker and a half. So we're gonna be adding that to our behavioral health unit. So I'm very excited about that, and potential for more. as they get into looking at what we're doing, so. And then, recruitment and retention. Back when I was applying for jobs, 200 people apply for one job. Today, 30, 50, maybe, we're still getting good people. It's harder to keep people in the profession for their entire career because people think, why would I want to do that job again? Who wants to do that? Who wants to put their life on the line every day and, have your freedoms possibly taken away, your family, be berated in the media and other things like that? Sometimes it isn't as appealing. So we have to go out and be in the community and show people, this is who we are. It's an honorable profession, but it takes work and it takes people to do that, so.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah, Vince?
Chief, how much time, I guess, is dedicated now or would need to be dedicated with, cell phones and video cameras in everybody's pockets and, the tendency for sometimes only part of the story to be told? If police show up and, I think we kind of ran into this just recently on a case where we only got part of the story, which then can get put out to YouTube or different social media channels where we have to react and work with communications and sometimes I would say even defend ourselves because this much happened, but this much got put out on social media.
Right. We spend enormous amounts of time on that, but what I'll say is with the body cameras, so, first in the state, second in the country to institute the body camera years ago, that was because officers wanted to have the full story. But it takes time to go through every single video and sort of look at it from every angle and figure that out. And that is common. We get more and more, and I will say we probably, over the last couple of years, there's been more and more complaints, allegations, filming, here's half the story. And it just requires us to sit and look at it. So yes, that takes a lot of time. We understand that people have questions about what we do, and so I understand that. And I would say that the majority of the time, there is not an issue there. It is the officers are doing what they're supposed to do. And so, it is an increase in time. And then just investigations with cell phones and all of those other things take a lot more time because everybody's basically carrying around a computer and you can't just grab that and take everybody's information out of it. So there's that part of electronics too.
Thank you.
I think one of the hallmarks, I think one of the hallmarks of our police department, and particularly the women and men who make up our police department, goes back to the values that Tonya started this presentation with. At the end of the day, in my professional career, I haven't worked with a group who is as committed to what matters to them, what matters to the community, and is as unified around those values and really living them out, really defining how we do things around here. What is the culture? Mm-hmm. And I believe that strength helps us to deal with the pressures of our current reality. Everyone has a cell phone. Videos in law enforcement are just part of the way that service delivery in this department happens. But as we anchor ourselves back to what matters to us, and our staff are committed to those things, I think that provides us with the real opportunity to be uniquely Burnsville, to continue to do policing in a community-oriented way that is very specific to who we are and what we know that our community needs. We won't always get it right, but that core commitment to what matters really is, I think it's quite remarkable of this department, and frankly the leadership that's taken us to this place. I think it makes us not only unique, it gives us a competitive advantage in a very difficult market to find the right people, the right talent to continue to do the work. But it also means that we need to take care of the department. Wellness, individual and team wellness and well-being in this area is just critically important, as many of you have talked about. That will be what continues to allow us to really find and retain the right people who are committed to those values to deliver that service to the community in what is arguably one of the hardest jobs out there.
And part of that is telling our story too, and we have to get better at telling our story, and that's where we reach out to communications and community engagement, because that's another thing I heard from our officers when we did the strategic planning process was, we want people to know us. We want to be out in the community. We want to tell them our story. You know, these are moms and dads and husbands and wives and people that have cancer and have problems in their family. They're normal human beings. And so to kind of get people to know us, right? What's behind the badge? And I think that's part of that as well. So we also have to get better at that. It's the time to do those things.
I think that's also reflective of the culture that Tonya's built, along with her leadership team and the folks who make the department up. And family is a big aspect of what the department does. We saw that today in the badging ceremony, right? That the sacrifice that these particular public servants are making has a unique impact on their friends and family, the people that they leave at home when they come to serve the community. And again, I think that gets to our values and the type of culture we're trying to create in order to be uniquely human in what is a increasingly complex profession. And a dynamic environment where community needs are changing.
Okay. Dan Keeley?
Preschool going into kindergarten, grade school, and they had a little ceremony. I don't think we had that when I was that young, but the class was probably 15, 16 maybe kids. And part of the whole ceremony was, what do you want to be when you grow up? And there were some real diverse answers, but I would say close to half the class, and probably was half the class, answered, I'm sorry, BJ, they wanted to be police officers.
Really?
And it was, they had like a sign and, you know, police officer or, you know, doctor or lawyer or accountant or, you know, whatever, right, to all kinds of professions, like scientist or whatever. And but at least 50% all said, I want to be a police officer when I grow up. And I thought that was really cool. It's a kindercare in Burnsville, and great group of kids. And it was really, I think, you know, I kind of felt there was a message there. These kids really are aspiring. They look at police officers as heroes. And obviously, that's a good thing, right? So
I love that. And, you know, we know that those connections at the most younger ages, to have that connection with police is really important and can kind of break down those barriers and make, you know, because it can be stressful for people to, you know, approach somebody in uniform. And we have our Blue in the School program where we have officers that work in areas, go into the schools to try to, you know, have those relationships with those kids, because it starts very young, and we want to, again, offer that opportunity that they can get to know us as just a human being. So, yeah, that's cool.
So you might have to wait about 18.
Yeah, it's gonna. I don't know if I'll still be here. I've already been here 27 years, so I might not be.
And then they'll be signing up.
Yeah.
Caden will graduate from college, and
Yeah.
then he's
He wants to be a police officer. I'm going to keep him on that
Okay,
track.
well, all right. I know some people, so there. And then just lastly on that from before was just, you know, our training mandates and the things we have to report on, that all has changed too. So with legislative changes, we have to do more reporting, more training, and so that puts pressure on staff. But again, we try to adapt and overcome that as much as we can. Just to give you an idea on average calls for service, so this graph, parses this out in decades, and what we tried to do here was remove traffic stops, because that can skew, and just really look at more apples to apples comparisons here. But you can see that calls for service are increasing, and we're only into 2022, and we already have quite a few more calls as they compare over the decades. And what that means is officers are then going to more calls, so they have shorter time between calls. That means more cases are likely needing to be investigated. That means more cases are likely being charged, more court testimony, more times officers need to be responding in for scenes, more trauma on scenes, and less time for the brain and the body to recover, to recharge, to have that time. They got to go from 0 to 60 in a second or less, and then they're doing that, more consistently as we see more calls coming. So it's less time to innovate, less time to use their strengths when they're doing that, and less time just being proactive, getting after, going into a neighborhood, stopping at a park, doing traffic safety, parking complaints. You all know how many complaints we get about all of these things, and they just simply cannot get to everything because it's done in discretionary time, which there's just not enough. So, and then that just puts, and that's our operations in those ways, but that puts pressure on every division across the whole organization, because when there's more of that, that means our support staff has to be doing more. It's more for leadership to be looking at, how are we managing all this? How are we managing everyone's stress? How are we managing these calls? We don't have enough people. Where are we gonna take them from? So, just to kind of give you that, sort of those average calls for service do continue to increase. And then this is so weapons trends over the last 5 years, looking at this, we deal with a lot of different weapons, and we have to assume that every weapon that they encounter on a call for service is a real firearm until they can prove otherwise. So until a scene is secure and they can really check that and figure out what that is. So as you see here, there's firearms in red, but then there's also, blunt objects, knives, those weapons are tracked here. And then other replica firearms, so BB guns, toy guns, airsoft guns, things that sometimes look very much like real weapons and could be. So officers have to assume that that's a deadly weapon and that could kill me or someone else. And so that just raises up a whole level of, what that call could become. And so those calls also, when possible, really require, if you can disengage, use time and distance and cover and figure out like what the situation is, because that can rapidly change in a really quick second, and we know that. And what's interesting about this chart here, as we look at, red is real firearms. So when you look at that, you can see already in 2022, we are dealing with more real firearms on calls than all of 2017. So at this pace, we'll continue and have doubled just real firearms, not to mention all the other types of weapons that we're dealing with. So that's concerning to me. And really, we're just moving into the summer months, which get especially busy. There's more people out, and more people have weapons. So things are getting increasingly dangerous in that realm.
In doing your analysis, because I'm looking at 2020 and firearms, my God, and I was doing COVID, and then you look at 21,
Yep.
the increases.
A lot of increases, and COVID, sometimes that year, we sometimes kind of go, okay, that's a interesting year, and we won't really know the impacts of that as we go along, but you can see even in the next year, in 2021, then it also rose up. And I am sure that we're gonna be beyond where we are already by the time we get to the end of 2022. So.
What is that attributed to? I mean, you go
Yeah,
from
how is
44
that trend?
to
Is that doing
64.
George Floyd also is part of all of that too? I mean, all of the different factors that come
Yeah,
into
we
play.
would really have to dive into like the details of these specific reports to go, okay, what in more people were not working, or, more people were out and about, maybe outside than inside. There could have been a lot of factors, but I think we see a lot of different spikes in COVID years on some things, but it's something to watch. So it's something, firearms are always something we're very concerned about, of course. But this is something to watch and see how we develop here over 2022, if we do in fact double where we're going in the coming years, because that means we need more officers to make sure that those scenes are safe. And we've had times where we have teams of people, 2 different areas dealing with calls where there's weapons, whether that's a knife or a firearm or whatever, and that takes our resources up right away. So then we use mutual aid or other things, but again, those are, if we can, we want to slow those cases down and figure out, do we have to approach this situation? What does that look like? So we're doing our work differently. We're not saying we're not going to respond, but we may do things very differently. So that's part of all of the changes that have happened and how we're looking at this because of the liabilities and the different things that happen. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about, some things that make us unique, because we can compare a lot of things, and sometimes you can't get the apples to apples comparisons, and what we do here in Burnsville, I think is unique in a lot of different ways. And I talked about it before, but high standards. We really have high standards, and we really focus on being community orientated, and how do we get into the community? How do we do our scheduling so officers are working the same areas? How do we connect them with their block captains? How do we make sure we're at night to unite? How do we do the things that are gonna build that trust and with our community? So, and again, mission, values driven. That is the main part of who we are, because again, if we do that, to me, it's very simple. If we're working together to make a difference through excellence in policing, we focus on our core values of honor, integrity, courage, knowledge, and excellence in every interaction you have with the community, we're gonna be doing the right things. Now, we can't do that in every instance right away, because it could be a dangerous situation, but when it's under control, then we say, you know what, there's time, we're gonna treat people with respect, we're gonna listen to what they have to say, we're gonna make fair decisions, we're gonna explain our actions. People have a right to know what's going on. And so that's where it's like, okay, we do what we have to do, and then we can slow down and say, okay, now let's explain why we're doing the things that we're doing. So we're very mission-driven on those, and just making sure we're wrapping around those values. And then, of course, our behavioral health unit team, really unique to us, and because each community is different, we are doing amazing things for our community, because I really believe that we're preventing things. So we can't measure everything, that doesn't happen, but I'm confident that from the stories I've heard from families and the emails or the calls that I get, that people's lives are changed by the work that is being done in behavioral health unit. And so I'm so proud of the work that Sergeant Max and Officer Erica are doing. And then, they're supported too by officers, and it's a lot of teamwork. But that has really made a huge difference. And when Chris had talked about, how do we engage in the community, we did an event where families could come out and meet behavioral health team. And just because the families sometimes, they're just hurting so much because they're dealing with someone in their family that's just for 20 years had this going on. And then they had this experience with our behavioral health team. And they say, I saw my brother in a different way. And that is so impactful, and I just feel like that's unique to us, and I'm really proud of that work. I'll also mention, we didn't add any more staff to do that, so they are, again, they came from patrol so that we could do that. So we're taking kind of from operations to get into these other things that we really want to do, and they want to do. They want to make that difference in the community, so.
But it's human capital intensive.
A lot of time. I
Yeah.
mean, that's where you're really slowing down, you're working with the social workers and just figuring out, these things could go on for hours and hours, especially if you have a critical incident or you have someone with a weapon. The days of rushing in and saying, we're gonna go do this, and either someone getting hurt or injured or killed, or a police officer getting hurt or injured or killed, that's not how we do business. But hours and hours of time these things can take, so. And then we're just, we're collaborative. We work with all of our city partners on all of this work. We couldn't do it without them. So anything that we need, they're helping us with all the time, whether it's IT, Carissa's group, BJ and I work very closely together, of course. So we need each other. And I think that's really unique. I don't hear about that from some of my colleagues or in different cities. I think, and ever since I started here, it's been like that. And that's why I love Burnsville and why I've stayed here this long, is because of those relationships. Otherwise, it's just really hard to get things done. So I appreciate that. And then a little bit talking about how we align with the council's strategic priorities. Again, safety is our core function. So, working with BJ, but at the end of the day, we need to protect life. We need to protect property, people's liberties, and take care of our community. So we want to ensure their safety and well-being, and that's the core of what we do. And I think we do that very well with the resources that we have. When I think about community engagement, community vibrancy, organizational culture, those to me are all about building relationships, building that trust, investing in our staff, and supporting them so that they are well, so they can go out and have positive connections with the community. So having people healthy, more likely going to have healthy, positive interactions with our community. When we have people that are stressed out, burned out, tired, sleep deprived, angry because whatever they saw in the media, then we don't want to have them have a bad day at work. We can't afford to have that happen. And so really trying to look at how do we do those things to support staff? And then other things like Citizens Academy and the behavioral health unit team and those senior safety camps, working with Carissa and all of our groups to get that done. Sustainability really being, again, good stewards of our resources, not only now, but in the future. And to me, that's about including our staff, because it's building that resilience for years to come so that they have lasting health, and then building a department that people want to come to in 15 years when they're out of preschool and they're ready to get here. So we want to build that for the future. And then infrastructure, really providing protection of city infrastructure. That's our job. So what are our city assets? What are the things we need to be concerned about? Knowing where those things are at, working with Ryan to get that done, and, working across the board. So at the end of the day, our priorities, when I think about our mission and values, and the city's organizational values, all of these things are woven in with the council's strategic priorities, and it's all about creating those great experiences for our community. And then to accomplish that, we need to be making sure that we have enough staff and healthy and engaged staff. So, what's important to us? Safety is important to us, of course. So we want to be prepared. We want to make sure our officers have the tools and equipment and the things that they need to provide the best service possible to the community. And so want to be prepared. Again, mission, core values, I'll say it 100 times. That's what's important to us, and you'll hear it from our officers. Wellness has been huge. Over the last 3 years, we really looked at how can we be better for our people. 25 years ago, no one cared if you went to a call and you saw whatever you saw. It was just go to the next call and you just figure it out. Now we know that's not the way to do it. And so we have wellness providers. We have people that will help our staff confidentially. And we want them to get the help that they need and to talk about this stuff, just like we want people in the community to do it. We want to take the stigma out of all of this so people just go and talk. And I hear people in our hallways, I'm gonna go talk to Marie, this is our wellness provider, or I had a bad day, and we have a peer support team. So we're really focusing on that staff wellness. It was one of the big things in our strategic priorities. So everything that we do, we try to come back to that's our foundation, and that's what we want to focus on. So because people can get burned out, then they're going to disengage, they're going to leave the profession, and we have really good people that I want to be resilient and stay in the profession and provide good service. And then we want to understand what the community expects from us. We think we know what the community wants, what they expect, and maybe to some degree we do, but our population is changing, our community is changing. What do people want from us? And so I know the officers really want to know, what do they want? Because we're just kind of guessing sometimes. And I think we have good experiences, but there's more that we can do, and again, maybe meet people where they're at, more so than them having to come to us and sort of taking that mystery out of who we are. So we just have this ever-changing community, and it really requires a lot of attention. So that's important to us. We want to make sure that we're doing those things, that we're living those values, we're focusing on the mission, and we're doing what the council expects us to do too. That's really important to our teams, and it was something that came out in our planning process as well. So, and of course, training, professional standards, making sure we're meeting our mandates and doing all the things that we're required to do, because there's a lot of liability in public safety. So. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about our staffing minimums, as I was thinking about, so our staffing minimums, you can see here, there's different minimum amount of officers that we need to be working at certain times of the day that we think can manage, what happens with all our calls for service. So that's important to us. And the tricky part with minimums is, there's this, and then there's also vacations, there's sick time, there's FMLA, we have people having babies, we have dads going out on paternity leave like never before, which is wonderful. Dads never used to take 12 weeks of, paternity leave, so, they're gone for long periods of time, which is good, and we want them to go, and we want them to have this time. But then between that and training and injuries, you get down to you're almost always running at a minimum. And when I looked at this, I went back to look at our historical data. We only have historical data back to 2012, but remember, I've worked here for 27 years. So I was remembering at least, okay, conservatively, these have been our staffing minimums for 20 years. And we have not changed that in all of this time, even though calls for service and these things are going up. There was a time for 6 months, we tried to increase this number by 1 in a busy time of 11 to 9 p.m. And after 6 months, it was like, we can't do this because we can never get time off and we can never do anything. So you're trying to balance safety. How many officers do we need to operate and respond to 911 emergencies, to keeping them healthy and making sure they have time off, or dealing with, life that happens to everyone. So while all those complexities and the calls happen, more expectations, we are at the same number of minimums. So it's something that we really have to look at because of all the things I talked about before with what's increasing. So when we need to slow things down, that takes people. That can almost take a whole shift sometimes. If you have a major incident, your whole shift is there dealing with it, and we're calling people in. And we're good at that. We're good at crisis management. We get it done. They're amazing when they're at their best sometimes when it's a crisis, and we have partners that come and help us. But this is something we really need to take a deep look at, because not changing staffing minimums for over 20 years it's with everything going on, it's a concern.
Madam Mayor, am I reading that timeline right? That's 9 p.m. to 3 a.m. is when we have the most officers on duty, on patrol, right?
And Fridays and Saturdays typically.
Right. And 1 till, it's really about 1 till, I'm not sure when, but is the lightest, right? Like middle of the day type of thing?
Yeah,
I
so
think-
from like 3 in the morning, 3 to 7, there's 4, and then from 7 to 11, there's 4. So
Yeah,
kind of
so-
that
yeah,
section
so,
is.
Yeah, 3 to,
So we try to look at, when are the most busiest times, and that's how these were created. But what I can tell you is that these haven't been looked at in kind of like heat maps and figuring out like
Right.
when are our busy times, since this, for years.
Yeah.
So I think it's gonna require some more
Sure.
time.
so it essentially reflects, I suppose if there was a major shift in activity, it probably would have forced a change. But this is sort of a reflection of where the call volume is
Yes.
today, right? And has been, and maybe traditionally is, right? Thank you.
I think I would add one point to that, Councilmember Keeley, and that is the most striking reality of any conversation about minimums in the PD for me is the fact that there's been no change in 20 years.
Yeah.
That you just saw, Tonya just talked through just the increase in call volume. We've talked about the complexity of certainly mental health issues as it relates to that call volume. And this is part of what we want to get a better understanding of through a more detailed staffing analysis of the PD, right? What should this look like based on what we say is important to us? Our strategic priorities, the department's values, what we know the community needs, and what does that mean for a longer-term staffing model? There's some complexities there that we don't know that we have all the answers to right now. But 20 years is a long time given the other change that we've seen.
Sometimes there's ways you can deploy certain things in a different way, and so that's what we need to really take a dive and look at it and go, okay, what are we doing with the staff that we have? Sometimes working different schedules, so there's a lot of things that we really have to look at, and not having looked at it for this many years, we need to do that, so.
Follow up, Madam Mayor.
Yeah.
I believe your staffing recommendation is, or from the staffing report is 8, is that correct? 8 full-time? Have you?
It's 11.5 over 5 years.
For 2023.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So-
Yeah, for 2023.
Yes.
Like, if you were to layer on 8 more officers, how would that, because it's hard to say 8 officers, okay, you got 7 days a week, you got 24 hours a day, so it may get absorbed into the chart and have very little incremental increase in any one number, right, or a day, right?
And that's why I say it's probably not going to have a huge impact, because where officers would end up, of these 8 officers, are not all gonna end up in this exact spot, right? So, and even if they did, we still couldn't make the impact that we want to. That's why we have to look at, well, how many staff will we have in 2023? And then what can we do to look at what we're doing? Is there a different way to do it? How do we deploy our resources? Are there different schedules? How do we balance out the need for all of these things we're responsible for with having people have time off and a way to recharge? So that requires someone more analytical than me to figure that out and really look at the entire operations, and that's what I'm working on.
Sure.
To
And
hire
I
someone.
remember in a previous budget presentation, you had a fairly significant number, or it was presented as a fairly significant number of, when we're talking about overtime. And when you have this constant call volume, and you still have the same number of people
Right.
trying to manage those call volumes, it forces overtime. And then there's so many other reasons why overtime comes into play with training and special events and all that stuff. They just keep piling on and piling on and piling on, right? I think that historical call volume was really a good chart to show really historically, where it's going. And then, of course, balanced against the same staff since 2006. Sorry, 10 and a half less
Yeah.
full-time equivalents compared to 2006, right? So during the time that the call volume was going up, you ended up losing staff, and it hasn't been backfilled.
And the other thing is this staff needs supervision. So we have to have at least one supervisor on patrol shift, 24/7, 365. So as it is now, you have one sergeant on for 12 hours, another sergeant on for 12 hours in a lot of cases. And sometimes you'll have overlap, but we have 8 patrol sergeants, so just enough to manage the schedule. So we have one that's injured, if we have one that's out, that is really a lot of overtime that the other sergeants have to cover. And then also, they get caught up in having to sometimes take calls. So then they're not doing the things we need them to do, which is being on calls, supervising, coaching, going to where the big scenes are. They might get involved, and that's not their role either. So there's that as well, so.
Thank you.
Councilmember Keeley, Bethany was just able to pull up the slide from the April organizational analysis discussion with the council, which is on our budget landing page in list form, just for the viewing audience. But the statistic that the slide calls out is there's been a 50% increase, 50% increase in PD overtime since 2013. And really over a 5-year period of time, it's about a 10% year-over-year increase.
Yeah, just
So
keeps
it
piling
is-
on.
It's, to your point, even earlier tonight,
Yeah.
it's significant.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, too high, because it equates to a burnout factor that is very directly correlated, right?
Yeah.
So the challenges, we've been talking about some of them here. Again, we can't measure what doesn't happen, so we know there's good work that we're doing, that we are preventing things. Not everything's a data point, but what I'll tell you is lacking is our resources, right, to support the demand, what I've been talking about tonight. Our facility space and functionality now and in the future, also a challenge, is gonna be a challenge for us. But the biggest things right now, calls for service are increasing. The complexities and the dangers of the calls are increasing. Weapons calls are increasing. Mental health calls are increasing. Crisis calls, trauma the officers are experiencing are increasing. People leaving the profession are increasing. Community expectations increasing. Liabilities increasing. Training demands increasing. Report requirements, mandates, all increasing. Staffing has not increased. Minimums have not increased. Overtime's increasing. So we are off balance here. So we have to right the ship and think about how we can continue to right it in future years. So a lot of changes and a lot of challenges, and everybody's, it's teamwork and you're working hard to do it, but there's a level of burnout factor, and I can see it in people and I can feel it when I'm talking to people. And I know that is across, the organization in different ways, and everybody has a lot of responsibilities. So it's not lost on me that my partners here also have needs, for staffing and things like that too. But those are the challenges that, we are experiencing right now. And then just as we move ahead, we want to keep the relationship strong that we have with the community. I think it's a special relationship. And again, we always are feeling very supported by the community. We want to make sure we have those strategies in place so we can recruit people, so that we can develop people, that we can succession plan. So we have people that want to become leaders in the organization and hold on to the values and continue on those traditions that we have here. And we just really need the capacity to do that. And we also have to make sure we're evaluating ourselves and we're looking at, our performance and our outcomes, and are we meeting the community needs, or what else do we need to do? And we need to be looking at that with the staffing analysis too. What are the things we're trying to accomplish? And then really investing in staffing and in the community. That's what's going to keep, the city safe and all of us safe now and in the future. So a lot of what I've already said, that's what we're looking for. And I just think, the time has come to think about how we're funding, the police department. This is the slide that Councilmember Keeley, that you mentioned. So this was initially 91 to 102 over the 5-year period. What I'll be asking for is 8 full-time staff. That will be sworn staff. I can't really even get into funding civilian staff or thinking about putting anyone there, but it will have more pressure on them. So down the road, we're going to need to look at how can we support staff and leadership staff at our level. Our command staff, we need help too to be able to run the organization with all of the different changes that have gone on. So really be looking at those 8 staff and just hopefully really getting after community engagement, behavioral health, those operational standards that we have, funding that. So, because we have been taking people back. We've taken people back from Drug Task Force. We've taken people back from the JTTF, the Joint Terrorism Task Force. We used to have traffic. We used to have street crimes, just to run operations. So we can't do everything. So we either have to stop doing things, or we need to fund the things that we want to do.
Okay, Dan?
Well, I believe it was our new city manager, Greg Lindbergh, told me once in a conversation about the budget, when you look at what we fund as a city from our property tax revenue, we do a lot of things. Communication, very important. Infrastructure, very important. Many other departments, community development, very important. But the biggest piece of the pie, by a long shot, it's like number 1, and then you got to go down the list quite a ways from a dollar standpoint. We're in the business of public safety. And as the backbone of our community, vibrancy, right? It's a little hard to have economic development if you've got a lot of crime. It's a little hard to have vibrancy and, businesses opening up. I think it's impossible to have prosperity if you have high crime and lots of problems. So everything revolves around making sure that we have a strong public safety department, police and fire, and that people feel safe. That's what draws people to a city, right? They leave the other direction if the city is unsafe, as we've seen around the country, and they draw to those that are safe. And you can't maintain safety stretching people the way we have. I think we, in a way, in reflecting back, we're very fortunate that we've gotten by pretty well. But it's clear that something has to change. And to hear it really put so eloquently when you say, we used to have somebody with this task force and we used to have somebody with drug, but we had to pull them back in because we can't maintain our core operations. And really, those should be, in a way, you could think of them as part of core operations, but you had to pull people back in to run the core operations of safety because the city call volume, the city population kept growing, and you're still operating on the same number of people. So I've said it before, I think we have not done public safety justice in the last several years. And I wish I could turn the clock back and figure out why we didn't, but now we have to. Thank you.
Yeah. Angie.
Chief, I want you to know my wife's been watching this tonight, and she's been very impressed with what you've had to say. She just texted me on that. I agree, public safety is very important in our community, but so is every other part of what we do in this city. We're a service organization, and every piece of it is very important, and we have to look at every piece to make it work right. We can't have one part stronger than the others are all still struggling. It's just not going to work. I mean, in my mind and my perspective, when we're elected to represent the city and the citizens and our residents, we're elected to pay attention to the budget. It's an important part of what we do. But we also need to take care of the needs of the city while we pay attention to the budget. You can't neglect one for the other. And you can't constantly look at staff or our city managers when they present a budget and say, that's not good enough, you got to cut it in half all the time either. And that's why these things happen to us. And we got to quit doing that. We just got to bite the bullet and start running the city the way it needs to run. And that's my perspective.
Well, Chief, it's really good, this process. So, Greg, I want to tell you that this process in each department, telling the story from where you were, where we're at, and what we need to do. And I remember for 2 years I've been asking for a staffing plan. And here we are, we do have a staffing plan. And it's interesting to also hear that you've been doing an analysis. And it is our responsibility as elected officials to look at every part of our organization. And I look for the things that are challenges. And staffing is a big challenge. But there is, facility, space, functionality, and so forth, because all of that makes a difference in the life cycle of the people who work in PD. Why? Because when you look at all of the analysis, all of us spend probably over 90% of our time at work. And you need that. And then you look at the call volume. When I was elected mayor in '94, Burnsville was only 8% diverse. The last census tells us that we're in the 40s, like 40-some% diverse. Dr. Battle told me that 191 is now minority-majority in the school. There are more children of color in the school. So it is complex, and that's what you've been driving at this evening. You want to know what our community needs from police. Service, mission and service is important, but also how are we meeting the needs with regard to the mission, right, and the service. So all of that, and so when I look at what you're asking for tonight, just like Carissa asked for, you're asking for 11 full-time to get at the aspirations that we need, that you need to run the kind of department that you're looking for.
And Mayor, the caveat to that would be, sorry, Chief.
Please.
The caveat with that would be, we've identified, Tonya and I have agreed through the analysis, we've identified eight FTEs as priority for 23, for a total of 11 and a half additional FTEs over the course of the 3-year plan period, with the very big asterisk that this is the one department where I've already authorized an additional staffing analysis, because our consultants came back and said, we don't know what we don't know. And we also recognize that internally, that we needed some additional outside help really to understand things like conversations from tonight, minimums, appropriate staffing structure given community needs, being very oriented towards those community needs. So we're in process of working through that. You'll see an agreement for that work that'll come across a council meeting in the near future, but we're actively engaged in continuing the work.
And wouldn't that include also better understanding of what the real demands are for the behavioral health unit, which,
Yeah,
I mean,
and
it just
that's
got
what I'm
started,
looking
it's
at
new,
in-
but
yeah.
it's been sort of, well, we're going to make it happen, instead of, let's take the time to study put the resources together and do it the way it might have been done, right? So that should come out of that, I would think, as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Councilmember Keeley, to your point, and actually back to Councilmember Gustafson's point, we are very focused on, Tonya and I, certainly her leadership team as we work through this, on doing this right, to capture the real need, so you have the information to make whatever policy decision you feel is most appropriate, budget and otherwise.
Well, and that's why all of this is taking place.
Yep.
For us to understand the story, not just us as elected officials, but our community. Because when I'm out talking, they're listening, they're reading the paper, they understand what's going on. And when I ask them, so what are you looking for? And they say, looking for candidates that's going to support the budget. Why? Because we have not done the work that we needed to do. We have been very conservative to the detriment of where we are today. So, you know, I know that you're identifying a consultant to analyze the current staffing deployment model. And so you've got some next steps here that you're going to go through. But yeah, and you need your new part-time FTE, is that in administration, or is that the new half-time social worker?
No, the halftime social worker we have right now, and then Dakota County,
Yeah,
we did
gave
some
you another.
interviews, so they're going to give us another one. I believe the halftime staff was more related to like an investigative aid, perhaps,
Okay.
to support investigations. You know, we have a crime analyst, but that takes a lot of work to do that work too. So support in that group was where that 0.5 was, I believe.
Yeah. Okay.
But I'll confirm. I'll make sure you get that for sure.
I think it's a good point to pause and say that although we've put some numbers in front of you that I'm very confident in, the police department is one where we have more conversation. You know, we've said 8 FTEs in 2023. There's 1 FTE in that Tonya and I agreed to hold to 2024. That frankly, the more we've talked tonight, I think I've changed my own mind on whether or not that's a good idea. So this is going to be an iterative process, Mary, to your point of.
And this is the reason why I asked Tonya, because people don't realize when we bring in, we badge new officers, they don't realize that you're still onboarding them.
Mm-hmm.
They're not out there by themselves doing this work. So you still have your original crew doing all of the work. So when you look at the minimums that you have and what we have now, it's not the true picture, is it? Yeah. And that's the reason why I wanted you to talk about how long it takes. And so when I look at these numbers, that's needed in police, or that's needed in other areas, I think we need to start doing what we need to do for the good of this city and what the city needs in terms of the service that they expect from us.
Well,
on all
I would
levels.
just say, again, and I'm gonna probably say this every time we have one of these meetings, thank you to Greg and Tonya and all of our staff for presenting this. This is the most comprehensive presentation I've seen. I know all of you have been here longer than I have, but this
would
is all
agree.
very new to me because we haven't seen this in the last 4 years.
Yeah.
Or the last
You don't
16.
know how to fix something if you don't know and I don't wanna say anything's broken, but you don't know how to help if you don't know where the help is needed.
Yeah, make the course corrections.
So thank you for bringing this to us because, again, like Public Works and IT last week and now this week, we're finally seeing where some of our blind spots are.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah, Danji.
I would agree with you that this is probably the most comprehensive we've gotten into this, but we have been told this before. The police chief, our fire chief have presented to us before and told us they needed people in the past, and we knew that. And we chose not to do anything about it last year. So it's more in-depth now, and we're bringing more visibility to it.
I'm gonna disagree with that statement.
Better correct
Go
that.
back to the meetings. I can tell you, both of them could testify, they
I don't
needed
know why
people. I'm just telling you.
No,
You're telling us what you heard in
No,
your meetings.
I sat in the meeting.
no.
Thanks.
But
Dan.
I think what.
Chief, did you
but-
make a
Madam Mayor.
presentation to us?
Yeah,
May I?
yeah,
Yes.
Dan Kay.
I just want to, There was a comment made that, we've been too fiscally conservative to our own detriment. That's only part true. The other part you're well aware of. Over 2 years ago, you asked for a staffing. Quite frankly, you shouldn't have had to ask for it. It should have been done in 2018 or 2019, and it was not. And so we were not exposed until Fire Chief B.J. Jungman actually gave us a presentation of here's what the needs really are.
His department.
It was just his department. It wasn't PD.
His department.
We were being filtered what we were being presented and given, so we didn't know what PD's need was, which was actually
Or any of the
significantly
other-
worse than BJ's need, right?
Or Ryan's department.
Exactly.
Or Tom's department.
So
Yeah.
it's like what we'd asked for, we shouldn't have even had to ask for it. It should have been something done long before this.
Yeah.
And thank goodness it finally got done, and now we are seeing the real story.
Yeah.
And because every time we have been given the full story, we respond. And I don't think we've ever,
Yeah.
we may not have taken action with fire department when that was first shown to
Or
us.
police.
But we were waiting for the comprehensive. No, we didn't have a
She talked
presentation
about
that said
behavioral
we're
health and how
10 and a
she
half
had to-
down and that we
She
are.
had help in that.
Yeah. No,
came
but
to
to,
us.
but to Vince's
No, it
point.
wasn't. No, it wasn't.
Okay, to Vince's point.
Well,
He's
that's
right.
Two of us that say no.
Yeah. He's right that to have this storytelling for each department,
Right.
there was a time that we did have department reports. We had department reports. But not to the extent that the story is told in this way.
Agreed.
And so this is the first time that the story is told in its most
I agree with
comprehensive
that,
way.
But we have been told.
Yes, there was a time, but each time the staffing part was missed, because I asked Greg and staff, I talked to Michelle, and Michelle, you told me to dump a lot of the stuff that you didn't want me to bring back to City Hall. And I wish I had kept all of those monitoring reports, because all of those monitoring reports had the story on each department. You still have them? Yeah. Oh, good. But I said, I'm bringing all of this stuff back, and she says, no, don't bring it back. I don't need it. So dump it. And now I got mad because I don't have my hard copy.
I'll get you an electronic copy.
We can even print it for you, Mary.
Yeah. So, but the thing is.
No, okay, no, I was told no by the clerk,
Yeah.
sorry.
The thing is, it's good to have the story told, because now our community also has changed, and they need to hear the story, because in the past, maybe some of us who have been here for a while have that story, but now our community has changed, and they need to hear the story, because we're living today and into the future. Yeah.
I think back to January, which was a difficult time from a staff perspective in our organization. And Councilmember Gustafson in mid-January said something that will always stick with me, and that was, moving forward, I need staff to just speak truth to us. I realize that we're in positions of power, and I need you to tell us the information that as professionals you think that we need. Speak truth to power is what you said. And that stuck with me. It certainly has led to kind of the evolution of how we're approaching our conversations with you, frankly, what we're doing tonight. But I'll also say that one theme that I've carried through with staff is we're moving this organization forward together. Whatever happened in the past, it happened.
Yeah.
And it's my commitment to the council, to our leadership team, and to all of our staff that you all have the information that you need to make good policy decisions, that we're responsive to the things that you ask for. And frankly, I'm not going to filter. I'm not going to hesitate to give you the information that we professionally believe that you need. And at the end of the day, it's your job to make policy decisions that you think are best for the community. And that's what we're focused on.
And Greg, I appreciate that, because if you don't give us the information, we can't make good decisions.
Precisely.
And we can't make good policy. So, with regard to your role and your responsibility, you and staff have to give us the information. We can't do this together and succeed together if we don't have the information to make good policy decisions moving forward. So I expect that from all of you. And I like it. So you need 11? We're gonna have to work on it. Hey, Dante. Dante,
Dan is hunkered down.
are you focusing here?
I am, yeah. I'm listening. I have notes.
Okay, good.
I also realize that it might lead us to meetings where I'm Googling our mandatory adjournment time. So
Yeah. It's okay.
There's a cost benefit.
Yeah, I think our mandatory adjournment is 11? 10. We can do this simply because we can make a decision to extend the adjournment time so that we can get through fire.
The council can make that decision. We
We can.
probably want to take that up now.
Yeah, 'cause-
Council.
We don't want to shortchange BJ.
BJ said it was gonna take like 5 or 6 minutes.
So,
You have time, BJ.
BJ's presentation is. Do you remember what I said in April?
yeah. So, I need a motion to move the mandatory adjournment to 10:30, please.
So moved. Second.
There's a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, say nay, and the motion carries. Tanya, do you want to finish that last slide?
I closed it.
Or not?
I mean, it was really
It
about
said thank
it's
you.
really about the assessment. Just that, City Manager
I went through
Lindbergh
the
mentioned
next
it.
steps for you.
Yes, no, I think we're good. Yeah.
Okay, chief.
Okay, thank you
Yeah.
very much.
You
Appreciate
need
it.
11 people.
Yes, at least. I'm just
Yeah.
saying at least.
11 and a half.
Yeah.
11 and a half.
And it will be more once we
Yeah.
we
Yes.
get through the current study.
Yeah.
Just preview. It's not going to be less.
Yeah. Chief BJ, you're on deck.
All right. Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the council. Thanks for the opportunity tonight. Hopefully everybody's awake now. Ready to go?
Candy bars, snacks, right?
Right. Anybody need any caffeine or sugar?
Yeah, anybody want sugar
Help
fix?
So we're going to talk a little bit about the fire department. You know the routine with how we're presenting things. I feel very fortunate to lead such a talented group of men and women that serve the community in such a great way. We'll talk about kind of who we are, how things have changed, and how our service really aligns with the strategic priorities of the council. So when I look at strategic priorities and the 6 pillars that the council has outlined, really we touch on all 6 of them. I think everybody thinks of police and fire and they think safety, right? They think of you call 911, we show up, right?
Yeah.
Or you need a fire permit for something and we show up and inspect that. But I will tell you that the other 5 are also rooted in what we do as well. When you look at community engagement, we interact day in and day out, formally and informally with the community. You know, informally, whether we're driving down the road, at the grocery store, running errands, wherever, we're interacting with the public day in and day out, even when we're not even on calls. At many businesses, we're a frequent flyer at the hospital, a big business in our community. But formally, we also interact with the public at calls for service, and that opportunity to engage the public is more than just treating a patient or putting out a fire, right? One of our greatest opportunities is that we are duly trained. So when we go in on that medical call for someone that's fallen, we can help assess if they need additional needs, whether they need additional help, whether their smoke alarm is working, other risks to them, right? So there's opportunities to engage and prevent things even when we're responding on those lower acuity calls. From the organizational culture, we've established and reinforced by the people we hire. I'm a huge believer in making sure we hire the right people and that we train them and treat them well. And if we hire the best of the best, we don't have to worry about what they do day in and day out. They will be highly trained, highly motivated people. As I've told people, I want to be able to put the reins on people. I don't want to have to push the wet noodle. And it's important, and that starts with how we hire people. We promote these people and hire the good people, and we use policy, training, and the investments we make in them. And this has led to high engagement scores in our department. We're very fortunate to have those great folks. Community vibrancy, with our risk reduction and response efforts, we keep the community vibrant. Councilmember Keeley just mentioned this about safe communities. There's been plenty of blighted communities that people don't want to live in. You don't want to live in a community where there's half-burned structures. You know, I've driven through these. They aren't vibrant communities. So not only responding to calls, but preventing those incidents from happening. People feeling safe, and they want to come out. And for us, it's about advocating for those residents and those businesses. Our close connection and work with the police department, code enforcement, building department, and all the other departments within the city, communications to get our messages out, help keep the community vibrant. From the infrastructure, whether it's our physical facilities and the beautiful new fire station that'll serve us well into the future, to the water infrastructure that we need to provide service, or we need to protect from a hazardous material standpoint. We don't want things going into our groundwater, right? So from a response perspective, we protect that infrastructure as part of our duty. We've also helped improve our infrastructure. 10 years ago, we have private fire hydrants prevalent throughout the city. If they're not on the public right-of-way, they're a private hydrant. And this community has aged, and people don't know they own the fire hydrant. And they're required to make sure it operates. Well, we found that 17% of our private hydrants, particularly in our multifamily dwellings, didn't operate. Well, when you show up to a fire and the fire hydrant doesn't operate, that's a problem, right? Now they're annually serviced as they're required by fire code, right? We have a program in place, and now it's become the mainstream, and now we don't have the issue of when we show up to an apartment fire that the private fire hydrant doesn't work. From a sustainability, we attempt to provide the service in the most efficient and economical way. It was interesting, I gave a tour to the Noon Rotary yesterday at Fire Station 1, and someone was comparing our service model to other service models and asked about our efficiency. And when you think about it, all of our surrounding communities that have private ambulance services send either a fire truck and or a police car to every medical ahead of that ambulance, right? So they're dual responding. In our case, for those lower acuity medicals, we're only sending the ambulance with 2 firefighter paramedics in it. Police don't respond, the fire engine doesn't respond. As the severity of that call increases, we start to send more resources. Or if there's a safety issue, PD will definitely come and help us out on those medical calls. But the majority, or a good chunk of our medical calls, you wouldn't even know happen in our community because there's no lights and sirens, and they're just driving to the call. And you'd think, oh, they're just driving back from the hospital, they're going to get whatever supplies. No, they're actually going on a call. So when you think about that from an efficiency standpoint, we are sending the right resource at the right time and only the resource that we need on that. We also, again, failure to respond in a timely incident degrades a community's vibrancy, leading to a less sustainable future, right? From a financial standpoint, again, those blighted buildings don't necessarily help our tax base. You also see up there the department's mission and our values that really coincide with the 6 pillars the council has, right? So we have mission and values. Again, that drives us to hire good people. That's what we make our decisions based on. I truly believe, and I've told our people, if they know our cultural values and what our expectations are, they need to be familiar with our policy manual, but they don't need to know it day in, day out, because if they make decisions that are aligned with our values, they will make the right decision every time, and they will exceed our expectations and our values. Because we need to hire the right people, because when they're out there making decisions, they can't be thinking back, where do I reference that policy, right? They don't have time to do that. They have to think on their feet, make good decisions. Well, that comes with good character, right? And so it's all about hiring those right people that align with our mission and our values. We just recently completed a strategic plan as well in the department for the next 3 to 5 years that identified things that are really in our council strategic priorities. So again, mental health innovation, both supporting our own staff as well as the healthcare system. PD has a great program with the behavioral health unit. We see that from a different lens where we bring them to the hospital, and I stopped telling people that there's a broken system, the system doesn't exist. And how do we help innovate that system that works to treat these mental health people beyond us dropping them off at the hospital and the PD then seeing them, hours later. So continuing that evolution. Enhanced on-shift staffing, we'll talk about that here in a little bit. The community risk reduction, we'll talk about. We continue to operationally improve. We continue to train to a higher standard and expect more and evolve as we learn more in the fire service. An enhancement of our wellness practices. This is one area where I think we've come leaps and bounds in the past 5 years. We now have a embedded health professional for our own staff that rides with our crews every month and provides training quarterly to them, as well as provides them training on what to do with mental health patients on calls. And he's also the person that does all our debriefings now. So we have a consistent person doing debriefings, and he's available to navigate our staff 24/7. So if they're having a personal crisis or an issue with a call, they can call him, and they're more likely to call and get help from a mental health perspective. To what Chief Short said, we're trying to break down the mental health barriers, not just in the public, but within our own four walls. And that has been an invaluable resource to us, and it has been utilized higher than I would have ever expected and been welcomed with open arms. And I will tell you, it has saved careers already in the past year. So I have people coming back from debriefing saying, I'm glad I went to that, instead of, well, I went to make sure my buddy was okay. Right? So, I mean, it's a complete mindset shift in how we're dealing with mental health of our own folks, which we've already seen the extreme value of.
I'm going to sound like a bit of a broken record. I said something similar about Tonya's department, and I believe the same about the fire department. Both police and fire set a model for living out their values, what matters to them, and creating culture that is very aligned with our community commitments, our strategic priorities. And I believe, Chief, that frankly that culture change around well-being and mental health in your department is a reflection of those values of character, of communication, of collaboration, really being lived out in the department. And that starts with BJ and his assistant chiefs, but it really is values bringing strategy and more importantly than strategy, just good service to the community to life.
So when you look at who we are, right now in the leadership, we have 5 staff, myself, 3 assistant chiefs and admin assistants. In the leadership, we have an admin captain and 6 shift captains. We have 2 fire inspectors. We have 34 firefighter paramedics. That adds up to 48 FTEs. 45 of those are allocated FTEs. The other 3 are overcount positions that we use, funded partially out of overtime to help reduce our overtime costs for long-term illness and turnover and things. So when you look at what we do, it's really risk reduction, right? And you saw me present this a while ago, the 5 E's, right? Engineering, really the fire code and enforcement of the fire code, plan reviews, and the equipment we have ahead of the response sets us up for success. And all these preparation steps before we get to the emergency response set us up for success, for the safety of the citizen from these incidents not even occurring, and for an efficient response when we do have an emergency. So those are a couple of the engineering controls as examples. From education, we will focus on that public education. That's targeted education of our youth and our elderly. It's AED and CPR for the general public. It's Stop the Bleed programs. It's all those kind of public outreach programs to whoever we can to increase that first responder capacity that can get there before we can. Public AEDs, again, Assistant Chief Dwyer's really run with that program. We got great donation from the Lions Club, and we, in a matter of a month, got 12 AEDs distributed throughout the community. Once we got folks engaged, communications helped us put the word out, and next thing you know, the things flew off the shelf, and we had great opportunities to engage the public and get more AEDs out there. I can tell you we have one business that saved 2 lives with public AED in a matter of 6 months. So again, the earlier we can get people doing CPR, the earlier we can get them shocking people with an AED, the more likely we are to save people, right? And we can come and provide the advanced care after that. And then I know many of you participated in our fire ops class, and we look forward to doing more of those, right? Give you a real hands-on experience of what does this look like. I can explain it to you here, but when you see it and feel it hands-on, it's a different experience, a different perspective. So again, we look forward to continuing to expand that so we can get more of the community experiencing what we do day in and day out, at least a piece of it. Economic incentives, right? Fees for service, fines for failure to comply, things like rental licensing, all those things help drive compliance and help drive a vibrant community by setting a standard. Enforcement, again, that's kind of our last preventative option. We'd prefer to do the education role, but sometimes we have to do the enforcement role with inspections, permits, and we try and find collaborative opportunities to to find solutions. Our first goal is to educate someone why this is important, right? Not just tell them you need to fix it, but why is it important to fix it? And then lastly is the emergency response, right? We don't want the incident to happen. The best one that happens is it never occurs. But when it does happen, we continue to see an escalating call for service. We continue to see the use of mutual aid. And the other thing is we have an all hazards response, right? It doesn't matter what the emergency is, we're going to respond to it. Like Chief Schwartz had said earlier, they're going to call 911 if there's a problem, right? They don't have another solution, whether it's their smoke alarm is beeping because there's water leaking through the ceiling, or whether there's a gas leak, or as we saw in St. Paul the other day, a tragic trench collapse, right? I mean, so our firefighters can be out doing any of that day in and day out. So we've got to be prepared to respond to a multitude of incidents at a moment's notice. So when we look at that, again, just to speed this up, the engineering, the education, the economic incentives, enforcement are all tools to help us prevent that response. So all those things before the emergency response help us to really save tragic events from happening. And that's really our goal is how can we keep those from even occurring? When you look at comparisons, it's difficult in the fire service. There's more and more departments becoming career, but over 90% of them in the state are still volunteer. More and more of them are becoming combination, like Savage, where they have some career and some volunteer. But you see, like the city of Egan now went full time. But because of our ambulance licensing laws, again, I sound like a broken record you've all heard me talk about, people were very intelligent in the city in the early 80s to grab our ambulance license. Our cities around us don't have that option. So although they went to a full-time fire department, they can't have any control over who provides the ambulance service or the quality of that service. We're very fortunate to have that control. So for us, Edina and Maplewood are the closest, and there's nuances with both of them. They're both not the same communities and don't really have the same expectations that we do. So we use them as some benchmarks, but I wouldn't say they're an apples-to-apples comparison exactly.
I agree. I agree.
On the emergency response front, again, we want to be response ready, 24/7, and to be response ready before they go on the call is that health and wellness, right? That fire station is a huge symbol of our commitment to the health and wellness of our folks, and I appreciate the commitment of the council and the community to do that. That shattered the glass ceiling on taking care of firefighters from a cancer perspective, from an emotional wellness perspective, and from a cardiovascular perspective. The three big things that are prevalent in the fire service on a health and wellness front give our firefighters the opportunity to mitigate those risks to the best of our ability. On the training front, again, that fire station is the opportunity, Able is the opportunity, but I'd also say a culture of that. I would say we have to put the reins in our folks for training. They are constantly training and preparing themselves to go on calls. After they go on a call, they debrief so that they're ready to go on the next one and do a better job. We talked about the community AED and CPR. Again, making sure we have the right staff and the right capacity to handle the call volume. And we'll talk about that in a minute. The appropriate stations and equipments, pre-incident plans. What do we know about these buildings before we even get there? We need to have the right protocols, and we need to have the right medical direction so that we're working under a medical director's license. We need somebody we can collaborate, and we've been fortunate to have a good partner over the many years with Alina to provide that medical direction. We also have to have the right policies because we need to have swim lanes and guardrails of how we want people to respond. And then we've got great mutual aid partners around us that respond on a moment's notice, both on the fire and EMS side. If you look at this, thanks to communications, they updated this so it doesn't look like it's from the 80s anymore. It's a nice graphic.
It's nice.
Very nice. Is this Andrew's work?
Yes.
Yeah.
Solid work.
How do you get the logo on those trucks?
Very nice.
One step at a
Now
time.
we're getting picky.
I didn't want to overstep.
Tell Andrew we like his work.
Turned out really nice. So this is an example of a 2,000 square foot home, and the firefighters needed on a structure fire for this, right? So the real key on a fire is to assemble a big team of folks to handle that incident in a short period of time. And right now, our minimum staffing 24/7 is 9 people. During the day, it's 11 people. In order to do this, you need 17 people. So we know right off the bat we're short and we need mutual aid. Well, that still takes time to get here, right? So when you see the folks that are circled up there, those are the people that we can't supply right off the bat, right? So we don't necessarily have anybody to ventilate the building right away, or a second person on the backup crew if something goes wrong, right? There's just things we can't do until we get help there. Now, that's a best case scenario if all of our folks are available. I would tell you that given the call volume we have, it's rarely that everybody is sitting in the fire station waiting for a call to come out nowadays. So that just detracts from that. I would also tell you, as you get into larger structures like our multifamily, this is exponential, right? So we need 15 personnel for a 2,000 slab on grade, 2,000 square foot house. You start looking at 3- and 4-story apartment buildings, we're looking at triple of that to manage that in a safe manner to provide the best outcome for both the community and for the fire staff. So we're never going to be able to handle all this internally, completely understand that. But to handle an initial response, given our call volume, we are behind the curve on this. So it's also important that we work, again, collaboratively when the call does come in, right? So when the incident occurs, we need the public to know it occurred and we need them to call. That's the biggest variable we cannot control at this point. So educating people and having them dial 911 when something occurs, right? If that fire is burning for 10 minutes before they call us, that puts us way behind the 8 ball. And those detection devices, right? Having apartment buildings that have monitored a fire alarm system so we get notified right away. Vastly important so we're not behind the 8 ball. Once 911 is called, our partners at DCC are extremely important that they take the call, get the right address, get the right information to send the right resources. And we're fortunate to have a great system there and great partners at the DCC. And then they dispatch the appropriate resources. Again, depending on the severity of the call, you could get a fire truck, an ambulance, police car, or all the above, depending on what is needed, right? It all depends on the triage at the dispatch center, and that's where that call taking and that partnership with the DCC is so important. When we have a limited pool of resources, we want to make sure we're sending them on the right calls for the right reasons, right? So we send an ambulance on the calls that need to go on, ambulance and a fire truck, the more higher acuity stuff, and then the highest acuity police department comes with us. And the interesting thing is that not everybody understands is it doesn't matter what truck shows up in front of your house, it's got firefighters and paramedics on it. So whatever your issue is, we can handle it with the first unit that arrives. We can start providing care. So if the ambulances are out on other calls and the fire truck shows up, it's got the heart monitor, it's got all the medications, the breathing tubes, so that we can help the public immediately if they're in cardiac arrest or have a severe illness. The same thing if a fire comes out and the ambulance is closer, they have their fire gear and their air pack with them, and they can go in and do immediate life-saving rescues if they needed to. So having those dually trained staff helps us put them in the right place at the right time when those incidents occur. Then once we get there, we need to set up and mitigate that incident, right? We need to have people well-trained, they need to know their equipment, and they need to act, again, on a moment's notice. And that's where that training and preparation becomes so important so that they do mitigate incidents. And I can tell you the increase in training in the past decade that we've taken in the organization has paid dividends in the injuries we see and the outcomes we see in our fires. It's shown time and time again. Then you look at the post-response. We talked about that pre- and post-response emotional wellness, right? To make sure people are supported. They have an opportunity to debrief afterwards and they feel heard after those incidents happen. Which becomes challenging as you start to have more and more calls. They have less and less time to decompress between those calls. Decontamination. I know you've all been through the fire station and understand the importance of decontaminating folks to reduce our cancer risk. Doing after-action reviews. What can we learn and what should we change? We continue to evolve. Our policy manual, our training continues to evolve because we might train on something and we learn a new technique as we go along. Billing. We think about this from the ambulance service perspective. We are like a clinic, right? We have our own national provider ID and we provide a medical service that we bill for. So that means we have to meet all the CMS requirements, all the HIPAA requirements, all the other federal, state mandated medical compliance requirements, right? So the documentation, the audit pieces. So all that is part of the process, right? So when the ambulance run is done, it's got to be documented well so it can go off to our billing company and get sent off for billing. So that's a whole nother process we deal with. Investigating fires or incidents we're required to do anytime there's a loss more than $100. Again, we continue to identify changes that are needed, and then we continue to analyze our data. We're learning more as a fire service of how we can use data to prevent more incidents from happening and really improve our risk reduction model. So what's changed? Well, our call volume, I will tell you that. I mean, this year we're up 21%. If we stay on this track, we'll be at about 8,600 calls for the year. When I started here as fire chief, we were a little over half that 11 years ago. So when you look at workload, that has drastically increased, and that is continuing to go up on a steady rate. That is straining our system. Technology has continued to evolve, whether it's that fire station, whether it's the equipment we wear, the computers that we have. If you just think in GIS alone, what information is available at our fingertips in the last 5 years, it continues to evolve, and Tom's well aware of that. And all the importance of having IT support so that we can do our job effectively. We talked about demand for service. Our demographics and the type of development we see continues to evolve, right? I mean, we're not a community seeing a lot of single-family dwellings go in. We see a lot of compressed multifamily dwellings and commercial buildings with limited access. That creates challenges for us. Training, again, we continue to train differently, right? When I started in this business, we didn't have to worry about active violence. Now we're trained in how do we respond to active violence incidents. We talked about hazardous materials. We talked about water rescue. There's a bunch of stuff that we've learned in the past couple of decades that now we can train people on to be safer and more effective. The types of incidents we go on continue to evolve. The amount of time it takes on some of these calls, the resources, you talk about those mental health calls that we partner with PD on. Thank goodness we have a great relationship and a great PD. Those take time to de-escalate, to get them in a good space, to transport them in the back of an ambulance in a confined space, to get them to the hospital. That all takes time and resources. Our regulations have changed, our processes have changed, and the systems we use. All that has changed, right? Our world's really changed in the past decade. So when you look at that, our call volume continues to go up, and yet our staffing has been relatively flat. So when you go back to 1985, which was our first full year of the ambulance service, we were at 1,959 calls. 2010, we were at 4,700 calls, and so now we're going to likely be in the mid 8,000 calls this year. And like I said, we've been really flat on the call volume side. And if you remember, before we put on that 12-hour ambulance with the safer truck 5 years ago, we were calling mutual aid a bunch.
Yeah.
If we don't act, we will be back to that situation. And I will tell you the challenge with that right now is most private EMS providers are having trouble managing their own call volume, and not just us, but I can tell you horror stories of some of my peers that are supplementing these private ambulance services 3 times what they were supplementing us. And so it's not a great world to be relying on mutual aid right now as our buffer to being ready. So we're going to continue to see concurrent calls, right? As the call volume goes up, the number of vehicles we need available is going to need to increase, right? We just don't have the resources. When there's 4 calls going on and we only have 3 ambulances staffed, it just doesn't work. We have to send that to mutual aid. So we continue to see the call volume increase along with the concurrent calls. We talked about how things change. Again, the fire environment has changed. If we can keep those fires to the room of origin, there's less than a 3% chance of a fatality. When they go past the room of origin, so when they become an apartment fire or a structure fire, there's an 81% greater chance of a fatality risk. That continues to be challenging as we see larger homes, even in our apartments, right? More open spaces, evolving fuel loads, void spaces. What we use to build these are not as structurally sound as they were before. They're very engineered, and they're fine until they have heat put on them. We know that we have smaller lots and we have new technologies. All that leads to faster fire propagation or development of fire, shorter time to flash over, so when that whole room is involved. And that leads to shorter escape times, shorter time till the building collapses or the floor collapses. And it really leads to new and unknown problems that we continue to work with. So really our goal here is to get there quickly, right, before it gets to that flashover. So when you look at that, time 0 on the left side is when the fire happens. It usually takes a minute or 2 to detect the fire before your fire alarm's going off. It's going to take you a minute or 2 to report it. It's gonna take a minute for them to dispatch. Here they show a 5-minute drive time. Generally, we're looking at a 6-minute drive time. And then it's gonna take you a minute or so to set up. So you're 10 minutes into this incident at best case scenario. So again, making sure that we have the right resources available and ready to respond is critically important, because we're gonna be fighting that fire about the time that it's going to flash over, that whole room is involved. So through all this analysis, you've seen this before, that we've identified a number of resources to get us to manage our workload, right? And really, we need 16 full-time FTEs. 15 of those are shift staff to make sure that we staff enough resources, and then 1 data analyst or 1 additional civilian staff to deal with that. What I would tell you is that's based on a 7% call volume increase, because that's what we were seeing when we did this and worked on this 3 years ago. I can tell you the last 2 years, that has not been what we've been seeing on average, right? Last year, I think it was 12, and I think this year we're at 17 to 21. So that's our best estimate right now, based on what we continue to see. It'll continue to evolve, and we'll continue to keep you updated as we learn more. But the additional 16 staff will allow us, again, to help the capacity issue, right? We're not gonna be able to fix it all at once, and really, it'll help us right-size the staff for what we're seeing today.
Chief, when you're looking at 16, are you looking at 16 for 23 or 16 in the next 5 years?
Yeah.
So how many do you need this year for 23?
We talked about, so we applied for that SAFER grant, that's still
Yeah.
hanging out there, right, for 6 people?
Well, it's hanging for how long?
We don't know.
Well, that's the thing, but we're
Right.
coming up to September when we
Right.
have to make a
Yep.
decision.
I would hope we would know by then, but what we talked about for the audit was to do 3 firefighters a year for the first 3 years and 6 in the last year. Well, I'm sorry, we do three firefighters the first year, 3 firefighters the second year with 1 civilian, so 4 staff the second year, 3 the third year, and 6 the fourth year.
Well, Chief,
So,
with what you shared with us tonight, and I'm looking at when you have a fire and how deficient you are in fighting that fire, you don't have the people to back up. So I'm looking at this.
Yep, and as I
This slide?
said, that's where we rely on our mutual aid partners, and some of those tasks just don't get done until we can get people there.
But right now, you are also telling us that mutual aid is not the most efficient and effective way for us because they've got their own problems.
Yep, particularly on the private ambulance side. The fire side, I will tell you, is becoming a little more reliable because some of our neighbors have added full-time staff, but some of them that are still volunteer are starting to see challenges, particularly depending on times of day and day of week across the entire country, but we're seeing it right here at home, right?
Yeah.
Tuesday at 10 a.m., who's available to respond to the fire station to jump on a fire truck?
Yeah.
That's a really small population that's available to do that. So, yeah, it's, and we rely primarily on our neighboring agencies, but we make sure that we have a staffed engine from one of the full-time departments coming to help us as well. But yeah, it's a challenge to get reliable mutual aid because they're also experiencing their own call volume increase, right? There's a reason they put full-time staff on because they're dealing with their own community needs. So yeah, we're in a time right now in the Minnesota Fire Service where there's a lot of change going on staffing models, and investing in the fire service because of the demand we're seeing, particularly on the medical side, and the inability to get a reliable response model, whether that's private EMS or whether that's volunteer firefighters.
Okay.
Madam Mayor,
Yeah, Dan?
what percentage of your calls are fire versus medical?
So I would say about 80% are medical, and then 20% are non-medically related. So that could be anything from a gas leak to a fire to a fire alarm, things like that. So,
How many actual fires?
so
What percentage of all the calls are actual
it's
fire burning?
But we get about 100 calls a year with active fire in them. That includes car fires, brush fires, structure
Any kind of
fires,
fire, right.
all those kind. I would say when you talk about major structure fires, we're talking about things like this, it's 12 to 20 roughly.
Yeah.
of those. But the hard part is that's retrospect 2020, right? I will tell you, we go on a lot of apartment fires that end up being cooking fires that are smaller, but you don't know that until you get there, right? So you send enough people assuming that it's a fire because based on the information when they call 911 and say, I got heavy smoke in the hallway, I can't wait until I get there and say, well, it's only a cooking fire.
All right.
So,
Right. So 100 out of over 8,000 this year,
yep,
probably.
Yep.
So clearly, the demand is in medical.
yep.
And when you shared this 3 years ago with us, I believe we said, go after a SAFER grant.
Yep.
And we were, I don't know, when did you get the denial?
Last year.
So
Yeah.
took a couple of years, but I know that for me, my only experience prior to that was the SAFER grant that we applied for and got back, I think you referenced 5 years ago, 6 years ago when we added the 4. I really didn't know until recently when I asked, what's the success rate of those? Because the only thing I ever remember was we applied and got one, and I thought, well, why wouldn't we get one all the time?
Right. Yeah.
Why would we ever be turned down, right? And in fact, and I asked the same of Chief Schwartz, and in fact, we have a very low percentage of actual success. And so that one instance where we applied and got it was not indicative of future application success. And so, I think had I been really more aware of really that's the reality of the history, we are now, right? So now we're approaching it from, if we get it, great, nice bonus. And it doesn't even pay, I think we did the math, what was it, 38 or 40% of the total cost or something like that. I'm sure maybe it's a little bit.
Cops grant.
Yeah, cops and SAFER are different, but.
Yeah, cops are different. But it's not a majority, right, of it per se. Maybe with fire, it's a little bit higher than cops.
Yeah.
But, so for the cops grant that we're going after, our approach has to be, if you get it, it's a nice little bonus, but don't expect it, right? Instead of, we asked for it and we got it, so we should get it again. So which sounds trivial, but it's a really different approach than to dealing with this from our budget decision standpoint. But I know that to your comment earlier, Councilmember Gustafson, we knew about the fire. We did know about the fire, and we did make a decision to go after the grant. And it took a long time to get the answer on the grant, but obviously now we're approaching it from, we're going to have to do it ourselves, right? And the grant is just not something we can rely on, which was a bit of a shock, quite frankly. We send a lot of money to DC, kind of expect a little bit to come back when we apply for COP and fire grants, but unfortunately it doesn't happen that way.
No. The last COPS grant we received, Tonya, that was back in the 90s?
Yes.
Yeah, that was the last one that we received
COP grants.
And if we're fortunate enough to receive either COPS or SAFER grants, we have 2 active applications out there.
Yeah.
The council will still see a staff recommendation, not to steal Dan's thunder, that essentially you levy for and budget for those positions, assuming that we don't have those grant dollars. If we receive them, we would essentially come back to you and earmark the additional funding that you might levy for those positions in different ways as an offset to the reality that frankly we don't know. And at the end of the day, both of those grant programs require us to plan for fully funding those FTEs in the out years. So generally speaking, after the 3-year period of time that the grant covers.
I would even say if we did get one of them, given the fact that what the staffing recommendation is from you is actually still under the need, we might just add that to the number of being hired, right? It'd help, if we get it, it helps us get closer to what the end goal is, as opposed to restricting, I guess, the growth of it or supporting the need, right?
I'm glad to hear you say that. Yeah, Vince.
So BJ, 16 gets us out 5 years, but assuming development continues on the path that we've been on with multifamily and then a lot of the commercial redevelopment and a lot of those being 55 plus, I mean, where are we at in 10 years? I mean, are we at 32? I mean, obviously there's always going to be continued need and growth and expansion, but I mean, where are we, when are we hitting the safe spot where you're, you know, and that's a very hypothetical question, forecasting things we don't know, but.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to forecast that far out. I would tell you that really from my perspective, we won't see that demand neutralize until the baby boomers generation is in the rearview mirror.
Excuse me?
That was a great
Yeah.
choice of words, by the way.
I'm being very careful of
I was
how
waiting on
Cautious,
pins and
be
needles
cautious.
to see what he was
Well,
gonna do.
Our,
could've said
our
expired
demand
or
is driven, when you look at it, when you look at the EMS demand, right? A lot of our population that uses that
Yeah.
is the aging population. Well, until the population that ages slows down, that demand on the EMS side is not gonna decrease.
You got 30 years.
And I think the demand that we're gonna see on the fire side from those development things tend to, again, be a legacy of 10 to 20 years after they're built. We don't see a lot of fire demand. I mean, we'll see some fire alarms and stuff, but you don't see a lot of that until those buildings start to age a little bit.
Yeah.
Chief, what would be your recommendation in terms of an update to the standard of cover assessment, to Councilmember Workman's question?
Yeah, I think that's probably a safer way to go about the question. I want to see that standard of cover be a living document that we would overhaul every 3 to 5 years, but that we update like every other year and provide some additional data and continue to look 5 years out. I think, we could project 10 years out, but my concern is that it gets a pretty wide net at that point. So I think the 3 to 5 years is a safer bet, and I think, if we get that 16 in 5 years, it'll give us a better idea to start thinking about other things. Because this also doesn't address anything on the preventative side. This is strictly about response and filling the gap of response. The question is, do we want to engage in preventative opportunities, particularly on the medical side, where we could make some impacts? This doesn't address any of those kind of policy decisions. So I would say my hope to Manager Lindbergh's comment is to make that standard of cover a living document that you can see annually updated with projections in there.
It becomes more about maintenance than catch up.
I think a good comparison to that is, we've talked with the council, 3 years ago, you implemented a comp plan. That was a big decision for our total rewards package for our staff. Frankly, best practices every 3 years, we evaluate that. We're going into that process again. It is a living, iterative process, and I would compare, be it total rewards, to how we staff the organization. It's something that we're going to have to keep on the regular cycle of conversation.
Chief, a lot of our multifamily facilities were built in the 70s when we didn't have fire codes. How many of those buildings do we still have that are not up to code? Because that's part of your challenge as well.
You're asking me all kinds of questions. I need to be very careful in my. About 60% of them are non-sprinklered. 50 to 60%.
Used to be 70,
Yeah.
until we started building new ones.
Yeah, I was gonna say the denominator continues to grow, so. So the same number of buildings are non-sprinklered that were before. And they're not, they met code at the time, right? So there was a
Yeah.
limited fire code in the
Yeah.
70s. And the only way that they would be required to come up to code to be sprinklered is if 51% or more of their building was damaged.
Yeah.
And these buildings that we have are large enough where that's not gonna happen. So
Yeah.
it is a challenge, right? Because you get
It is
these
a challenge.
fires that propagate through multiple units.
Yep.
And that's frankly where the rental licensing and inspections of both code enforcement and fire in those buildings has made a huge impact. I mean,
And
we
that's why
have,
that's important.
yeah, we can show the numbers where we've reduced firefighter injuries, civilian injuries, all those kinds of things have been mitigated
Yeah.
through active code enforcement.
Yep.
And I've watched it with my own eyes. Are these places perfect? No, but they're safer than they were, right? And if things do happen, we know that exit doors work, exit lights work, things that are important to get people out.
Yeah. So I'm looking at the statistics that came out in our report that we just saw for for May,
Yep.
and the changes in your medical, rescue and medical services. You have 130% change,
Yep.
increase.
Yep. Yeah, it continues to
And
rise.
it continues to climb. Yeah. I watch both of your reports that come out on a monthly basis. So, because I'm looking at police's report also, and the increases are, phenomenal. So, yeah. Okay.
Thanks for staying awake for my presentation.
Hey, and look at it, you got a little bit more time there, Chief, but it's
About
okay.
15 minutes.
You don't
Come
need
on,
to take
David, Chief.
Yeah.
You got some
Right?
filler?
I was trying to keep it to the 5, but
Yeah.
I didn't meet that expectation.
Almost still should have went with, you know
Yeah.
what I need.
Right. Well,
So,
thanks for the time, and I appreciate the questions and the engagement.
well, actually, I want to just say thank you to all of you, to Carissa, Tonya, and BJ. Thank you for telling the story that helps our residents and our businesses to understand the challenges that we have, and that we need to make sure that we meet the need that they expect from us in terms of the services that we provide. So thank you for taking the time to put this together, to inform us, to educate us, and to ensure that we have the knowledge so that when we start making these decisions as we go through our budget process, we have the information. So thank you for that. Any other thoughts, comments?
Mayor, Council, just so you're aware, the slide decks from tonight, along with a full video of these conversations, will be available on our budget landing page, burnsvillemn.gov/budget, or /budget.
I'm putting PDFs up right now, video will be up in a couple minutes.
Excellent. I'll also make sure that the slide decks are in your weekly update as well.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody. And if there's nothing else to come before this body, we stand adjourned by acclamation. Thank you, everyone.